Right. All right. Welcome back to the live show. You know what time it is. It is your boy Genesis. Of course, it is 2:20 a.m. and we're going to be covering some important subjects, in my opinion, that we have to talk about. A lot is going on around the United States and across the world. We see what's going on with G7. The OG was at the G7 summit and they had a conversation with the Prime Minister of Canada. And also, Iran, Israel is still going on. And there's been an evacuation update and release from the 45th, now the 47th President of the United States. He said Tehran should evacuate immediately. So, what does that mean? What is going to happen to Tehran? Means something big might be hitting Tehran. But yeah, Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson have their own reservations about what's going on in Israel and Iran. And of course, Simon Biles has been getting the boot from really everybody who is in support of no man in women's sport. I have my reservations about Simon Biles. I think she's the GOAT when it comes to female woman gymnastics. And, everybody has the right to say what they want to say and give their own opinions. But I wouldn't want my 5-year old daughter flipping with, you know, a guy. All right. When it comes to competitions and stuff. And most of these girls work hard to get their scholarships. And if they have to compete with a guy, it's almost impossible to do it. But we're going to check out the OG. We're still going to come back to that conversation, of course. But for now, we're going to check out President Trump as he participates in bilateral meeting with the Prime Minister of Canada.
Canada.
Thank you very much.
It's a great honor. Happy birthday. A few days short.
A little bit.
A few days short, but didn't have a chance to see you on the day. Happy birthday to the U.S. military as well, 250th, and this is the 50th birthday, if you will, of the G7. This marks the 50th birthday of the G7, and the G7 is nothing without U.S. leadership, and your personal leadership of the United States, many issues. Geopolitics, economic, technology, and working hand in hand with the United States, Canada and the United States, and the other G7 partners with your leadership. Very much looking forward to the meeting and grateful to have you.
Thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate it, and we've developed a very good relationship, and we're going to be talking about trade and many other things. And we have a whole group of people, some traders and some other people. I see my top economy people. But we have a very talented group of people, and you do too, and I know they work together very well. I look forward to that. The G7 used to be the G8. Barack Obama and a person named Trudeau didn't want to have Russia in, and I would say that was a mistake, because I think you wouldn't have a war right now if you had Russia in, and you wouldn't have a war right now if Trump were president 4 years ago, but it didn't work out that way. But it used to be the G8. And now it's, I guess, what's that, 8 years ago, it switched over. They threw Russia out, which I claimed was a very big mistake. Even though I wasn't in politics then, I was very loud about it. It was a mistake in that you spend so much time talking about Russia, and he's no longer at the table. So it makes life more complicated. But you wouldn't have had the war. Other than that, I think we're going to accomplish a lot. And I expect to. And I think our primary focus will be trade and trade with Canada. and I'm sure we can work something out.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so much. Thank you very much.
Mr. President,
How close are you
Say
to
it.
the deal?
what is holding up a deal with Canada from your perspective?
It's not so much holding up. I think we have different concepts. I have a tariff concept, and Mark has a different concept, which is something that some people like. But we're going to see if we can get to the bottom of it today. I'm a tariff person. I've always been a tariff. It's simple, it's easy, it's precise, and it just goes very quickly. And I think Mark has a more complex idea, but also very good. So we're going to look at both, and we're going to see what we're going to come out with something. Hopefully.
Do you think a deal is achievable within days, within weeks? Is there that kind of runway?
Yeah, it's achievable. Both parties have to agree. Yeah, sure.
Mr. President, have you heard any signals or seen any messages from intermediaries that Iran wishes to de-escalate the conflict?
Yeah,
What have you heard? What have you heard from the Iranians?
they'd like to talk, but they should have done that before. I had 60 days, and they had 60 days, and on the 61st day, I said, we don't have a deal. They have to make a deal, and it's painful for both parties, but I'd say Iran is not winning this war, and they should talk, and they should talk immediately before it's too late.
And what would you say, in your opinion, what would it take for the U.S. to get involved in this conflict militarily?
I don't want to talk about that. We'll
And
see.
you mentioned Putin. Do you think that he should have a seat at the G7 today, that it should be the G8?
I'm not saying he should at this point, because too much water's gone over the dam, maybe. But it was a big mistake. Obama didn't want him, and the head of your country, the proud head of your country, didn't want him. This was a big mistake. You wouldn't have that war. You know, you have your enemy at the table. Even I don't even consider him. He wasn't really an enemy at that time. There was no concept. If I were president, this war would have never happened. But likewise, if he were a member of what was called the G8 at that time, it was always the G8, you wouldn't have a war right now.
Why not?
What intelligence support are you providing Israel?
We've always supported Israel. We have for a long period of time, strongly. And Israel's doing very well right now.
Why not have China as the G8? Why not have China here, the biggest economy in the world after the United States?
Well, it's not a bad idea. I don't mind that. If somebody wants to suggest China coming in, I think we suggest. But you want to have people that you can talk to. You know, they don't talk. Putin speaks to me. He doesn't speak to anybody else. He doesn't want to talk because he was very insulted when he got thrown out of the G8. As I would be, as you would be, as anybody would be. He was very insulted. And, I mean, he was thrown out by Trudeau, who convinced one or two people, along with
Said by
Obama.
Trudeau.
He was thrown out. And
Oh, God.
he's not a happy person about it, I can tell you that. He basically doesn't even speak to the people that throw him out, and I agree with him.
Oh, man.
Go ahead.
On immigration, why are you ordering ICE to target Democratic inner cities? What's behind that?
I don't know what you're saying.
You did a post last night where you said you want ICE to really target Democratic.
Yeah, I want them to focus on the cities because the cities are where you really have what's called sanctuary cities, and that's where the people are. I look at New York, I look at Chicago. I mean, you got a really bad governor in Chicago and a bad mayor, but the governor's probably the worst in the country, Pritzker. But I look at how that city has been overrun by criminals, and New York and L.A. Look at L.A. L.A. Those people weren't from L.A. They weren't from California. Most of those people, many of those people, and that's the focus. Biden allowed 21 million people to come into our country. Of that, vast numbers of those people were murderers, killers, people from gangs, people from jails. They emptied their jails out into the U.S. Most of those people are in the cities, all blue cities, all blue cities, all Democrat-run cities, and they think they're going to use them to vote. It's not going to happen.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I'm going to exercise my role, if you will, as G7 chair, since we have a few more minutes with the president and his team, and then we actually have to start the meeting to address some of these big issues. So, alors, merci beaucoup pour vos questions.
Nobody wants to hear from you, sir. They want to listen to the American president. Okay, some people call him the king. Who knows?
Thank you. That's it.
Okay. Oh my goodness. I liked the fact that it spoke about G8 and Justin Trudeau, as well as, you know, the one they call the other person. But I like the fact that they spoke about Trudeau in front of the current Prime Minister of Canada. That means nobody can really stop this guy from saying his heart, what he truly believes. And that's the facts, okay? This is the OG right here. Here we go.
The Right Honorable Mark Carney, Prime Minister of Canada, and Mrs. Diana Fox Carney. Le Très Honorable Mark Carney, Premier Ministre du Canada, et Madame Diana Fox Carney. Her Excellency Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, and Professor Dr. Heiko von der Leyen. Son Excellence, Madame Ursula von der Leyen, Présidente de la Commission européenne, et Professeur Dr. Heiko von der Leyen. His Excellency Antonio Costa, President of the European Council. Son Excellence Monsieur Antonio Costa, Président du Conseil européen. His Excellency Friedrich Merz, Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, and Mrs. Charlotte Merz. Son Excellence Monsieur Friedrich Merz, Chancelier de la République fédérale d'Allemagne, et Madame Charlotte Merz.
Enjoying our football talk. My wife.
His Excellency Shigeru Ishida, Prime Minister of Japan, and Mrs. Yoshiko Ishida. Son Excellence, Monsieur Shigeru Ishida, Premier ministre du Japon, et Madame Yoshiko Ishida. The Right Honorable Sir Keir Starmer, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Le Très Honorable Sir Keir Starmer, Premier ministre du Royaume-Uni de Grande-Bretagne et d'Irlande du Nord. Her Excellency Giorgia Meloni, President of the Council of Ministers of the Italian Republic. Son Excellence Madame Giorgia Meloni, Présidente du Conseil des ministres de la République italienne. The Honorable Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America. L'Honorable Donald J. Trump, Président des États-Unis d'Amérique.
Let's go. Let's go. Yeah, that's right. Oh, that's your wife? Beautiful. Ah.
You go over there. I'll put you in the middle. Okay, good. Yeah. Not bad. Not bad. Here we go. Perfect right up there. Here's we got the third one the other day. We said 100% chance of rain. I thought it was supposed to rain. But they'll say it's 50 years when it was. Okay, that's good. We're good? Okay. All right. So, Dr. You come this way.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. On to the next.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Welcome to Kananaskis and the 2025 G7 Leaders Summit. I'm pleased all leaders are here, honored by your presence. In my home province, Alberta, in the heart of the Canadian Rockies, I'd note that we are also meeting on Treaty 7 territory. These are the traditional lands of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, and the Tsuut'ina First Nations. And we're gathering at one of those turning points in history. I think we all recognize that turning point where the world looks to this table for leadership. 50 years ago in France, a group of leading industrial nations got together in the face of global economic and financial crisis. The end of the international monetary system is known. Stagflation threatening. Challenges in the Middle East, geopolitical challenges in the Middle East, and it was the frank, informal discussions around that table in Rambouillet that led to a long period of decisions and prosperity at that time. Alors, nous avons la chance.
We are fortunate enough to have here President Macron as the oldest member representing that state. 7
gathered to integrate those countries that had been behind the Iron Curtain of communism and to accelerate the flow of capital and trade to the developing world. 23 years ago, the G7 met here in Kananaskis. We were just talking about it. And that was when the world was still reeling from the aftershocks of 9/11, another turning point in history. And amongst the many decisions taken were control of the spread of weapons of mass destruction, a subject that we'll be coming back to. So as I said, we're meeting at one of those hinge moments, those turning points in history. The world's more divided and dangerous. Hostile states and terrorists have expanded their capabilities and their reach, threatening global security in our local communities. Global commerce, energy systems, even intelligence are all being rewired.
As G7 member states, we have the opportunity to shape tomorrow's world. A world that is more safe, more prosperous, more fair, and more free. However, the G7 must adapt in order to fulfill its mission.
A strategy. We have to change with the times and to build a better world. And some of you, such as you, Mr. President, have anticipated these massive changes and are taking bold measures to address them. All of us around this table are reinforcing our militaries and security services for the new world. But we all know that there can be no security without economic prosperity, and no prosperity without resilience. And in a world where shocks flow across the borders, that resilience comes from cooperation. Cooperation that starts around this table. Cooperation that can lead to a new era of prosperity. Energy security and critical minerals, artificial intelligence, quantum, combating human smuggling and transnational repression. So we will have open, frank discussions over the course of the next 2 days. We might not agree on absolutely every issue, but where we will cooperate, we will make an enormous difference for our citizens and for the world, and bring the next era of prosperity, I hope, to the benefit of those we serve. Avec tout cela,
with that being said, I would like to thank the media very much indeed.
Some work to do, which will begin in a moment. Thank you very much.
All right. Shout out to the G7, which should be the G8, like the commander-in-chief said. All right, here we go. What we got?
Resolute, but also happy. from left to the right. Yeah, we go from left to the right. Yeah. So everyone gets a direct line of sight. Pretty good. Get away. It's a shame. Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
President, any statement on why you're leaving the G7 early for Washington?
Well, I have to be back. Very important. I want to just
Everybody's there, but the media wants to hear from the greatest president in history, the commander-in-chief, the 45th, now the 47th president of the United States. Y'all can say what y'all want to say, but this man right here is doing his job.
thank our great host. He did a fantastic job. Thank you in Canada. But you probably see what I see, and I have to be back as soon as I can. I'm going to have dinner with these wonderful leaders, and then I get on the plane. I have to be back early.
Have you heard from the National Security Council?
I loved it. I tell you, I loved it. And I think we got a lot done. Really a lot done. In fact, UK, we signed a big trade deal today, and we're working on others. But we had just a really great relationship with everybody, and it's really nice. I wish I could stay for tomorrow, but they understand. This is
there a reason,
big,
Mr. President,
this is big
that you
stuff.
can't do your business
You have
from
questions
here?
for anybody else?
Have you reason that
No, they don't. They don't have questions for anybody else, sir. 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 They have no questions. They have no questions for this man. They only have questions for you because you are the leader of the free world. They ain't got questions for these folks out here.
This is big
You
stuff.
can't do your business
You have
from
questions for anybody else?
No, they don't. Look at it.
Is there a reason you can't do your business from here, sir?
We've got a bit more work to do, so we'll go do it over
Mr.
dinner.
Carney,
But
have you
thank you
been
very much.
briefed on this?
I've
I like the fact that Carney is thinking like, he's in charge. Okay.
I'm very grateful for the president's presence and contributions,
happen to be okay on the ride?
and I fully understand why.
We'll see
why
you
he
on the
must
plane.
return. Okay,
We'll see you on
take
the
care.
plane.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, you better stay with the commander-in-chief and get some light. Okay? Get some attention. Get some attention. Okay? All right, here we go. The 5.
And it is the 4th day of the deadly conflict between Israel and Iran. President Trump is talking to the press at the G7, and we are monitoring that for any big news. In the meantime, let's go to Mike Tobin. He can give us a quick catch-up from Tel Aviv. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Dana. Iran is now interested in...
Whoa. That's a strong neck right there. That's a strong neck.
in de-escalation and a return to the negotiating table with the condition that the U.S. stays out of the fight. The U.S., for its part, is now sending the USS Nimitz carrier strike group to the region ahead of schedule. There was a strike during a live broadcast of Iranian state TV, and what I can show you now is video of the aftermath of the state TV building in Tehran on fire. Israel, for its part, did send a warning into the area, warning people to evacuate ahead of that strike. State TV is now back on the air broadcasting from a backup location. Israel's prime minister says Israeli jets can now do whatever they want in the skies over Tehran.
The Israeli Air Force controls the skies over Tehran. This changes the entire campaign. We are on the way to achieving our two goals: eliminating the nuclear threat and eliminating the missile threat.
We have new video out of Iranian F-14s on the ground being taken out by Israeli airstrikes. Iran purchased those F-14s before the Islamic Revolution in 1979. We also have satellite images of missile production and nuclear facilities before and after Israeli airstrikes. Israel says 1/3 of Iran's missile launchers have now been destroyed. We keep getting warnings out of Iranian state TV and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard that drone strikes and missile strikes are inbound to Israel, but thus far they haven't materialized. It doesn't mean they won't, but we usually get credible warnings from Israel's Home Front Command, and we haven't had that yet this evening. Dana?
All right, Mike Tobin, thank you. Stay safe. And we will continue on with this. The big headline today is Iran ready to wave the white flag and cry uncle. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that Iran is seeking talks with the U.S. and Israel to end the hostilities. President Trump out with world leaders at the G7 in Canada and once again imploring Iran to make a deal before it's too late.
Have you heard any signals or seen any messages from intermediaries that Iran wishes to de-escalate the conflict?
Yeah, they'd like to talk, but they should have done that before. I had 60 days, and they had 60 days, and on the 61st day, I said, we don't have a deal. They have to make a deal, and it's painful for both parties, but I'd say Iran is not winning this war, and they should talk, and they should talk immediately before it's too late.
Jesse, President Trump has been consistent for 10 years that Iran should not be allowed to have a nuclear weapon, and letting Israel do what it thinks it needs to do to protect itself.
Right. So we're pretty involved already. We greenlit the operation, obviously. We're intercepting all the missiles that Iran's sending over, and we have shared intelligence and are doing refueling flights. The question is, how much more involved are we going to get? And so a few scenarios. One, if the Iranians attack U.S. assets, we'll have to get involved. The question is whether we're going to give or use bunker-busting bombs to completely eliminate the Iranian nuclear program, or if we'll authorize regime change strikes against the leadership. And I think the balance that Trump's trying to strike is you can't allow the Iranians to have a nuclear weapon. It's been almost 100 years of U.S. policy, non-proliferation. You can't get blackmailed by rogue states. But also, you can't have regime change wars, and those have unintended consequences. So if you were to have a decapitation strike against the Iranian leadership, what comes next? Because it's a theocracy, and you have 30,000 radical Muslim clerics that are still there. You can't kill all of them. So does it break down into militia factions where they all just kill each other? Do we install somebody? Do people come from all over the region with guns? Is there an insurgency? No one knows. And so the Israelis have their own agenda. They want this guy gone. Now, does that agenda jive with our agenda? Maybe not, because they're not going to be the ones to manage the chaos. We're going to have to manage the chaos, and they know that, and that's fine. But we've already overthrown an Iranian leader before. We installed the Shah, and he was a great ally for many years, and he pumped oil, and he was fantastic against the Soviets, but he was so unpopular, he was overthrown by these even more fundamental radical people who we're still dealing with today. The big question is the Iranian nuke deal still possible? Now, the Israelis say no. They call them fake talks. They think they're going nowhere, and we're getting strung along. Donald Trump disagrees. He thinks there can be a deal that is put together. And at this point, the Iranians have no leverage. And so it looks like they're kind of begging to come back to the negotiating table. And Donald Trump isn't ready to do the deal yet. I think he's going to let the Israeli military continue to soften up Iranian targets as they finally limp back to the negotiation table and swear off enrichment. And that would be a great outcome if they swear off enrichment. But I don't know if that's even possible, because the Iranians saw what happened to Gaddafi. Remember, after Saddam was toppled, Gaddafi was like, all right, we'll get rid of the nukes. And the next thing you know, Hillary and the Europeans came in and took him out. So very delicate situation. The next couple of days will be pretty serious.
And the IAEA, which I guess it's basically the international organization that checks on nuclear enrichment, just last week, they said that Iran is in total non-compliance, Harold. And at the same time, the Israelis said, we underestimated our enemy on October 7th, and we can't afford to do it again because they're closer than ever to a nuclear weapon. So now the stage is set. In the meantime, though, we still have Israel has 53 hostages still in Gaza.
So good to be back around the table. Hope everyone had a productive and happy Father's Day weekend. Jesse, you framed it fairly well. I think the only thing I would add to what you eloquently said is two things. First, we're going to be confronted as a nation very soon with whether or not we should provide the wherewithal and the resources. We're the ones with the munition and that bunker-busting bomb that you talked about that would be used to blow up a half a mile under earth there, the mountain that we've identified, that the Israelis have identified. I'm a believer that we should, if the Israelis believe that's what's needed to put an end to this. I listened to Mr. Netanyahu, who I'm not always a fan of, but I listened to him on Sunday and had a chance to react to him on Bret Baier's show. Bret did a really good interview. I thought Mr. Netanyahu was convincing. He made 2 points there. He said, first, the slumber of democracy. He invoked Churchill, talking about when democracies get lazy, they get content. This is when these kind of evil things happen. We have a moment here to stop this. He also spoke to the Iranian people and spoke to the Persian people and said, look, the Israelis and the Persian people have had a great relationship over many centuries. There's no reason going forward, if we get past this ugly and unfortunate chapter, that we can't do the same going forward. Now, I understand, Dana, some of the concerns that Democrat and Republican politicians, including some supporters of President Trump, have about broadening this war, because the real risk here is the escalation of the war. Jack Keane said something I thought very, very telling over the weekend as well, and even repeated on our network today. He said that the Army, Navy, and Air Force of the Iranians have been diminished and weakened, and that the leadership of their Army, Navy, and Air Force are diminished and poor as well. And if we're thinking about the moment in a way to put an end to this, this might be the moment to do it. I remember when there were those who were saying we should have supplied more support and more resources for the Ukrainians against the Russians. President Trump often says that had he been president, that never would have happened. Russia would have never invaded Ukraine. And I assume he meant that he would have provided more resources and tools for the Ukrainians. I think we're at that moment now, Dana, with this Iranian-Israeli conflict. I don't want a broadening of the conflict. I don't want an escalation. I think the president of Turkey and others are right. We're on a precipice. But what I don't want to have happen going forward is this risk and threat that the Iranians pose. And what you led into this question about, they have lied about their preparation, their ability to develop and detonate a nuclear weapon. Mm-hmm. I don't want that. And even if the IAEA is wrong, I'm willing to take the risk. If we have this moment now, we should destroy this capability of the Iranians.
Kennedy, I feel like President Trump doesn't get credit for something else. It's a key part of the story, but it's a smaller part of the story. And it's that, first of all, Israel did degrade the capabilities of Hezbollah and Hamas. And then you have President Trump in the Middle East just 2 weeks ago, making friends, making allies, and recognizing the new Syrian government. To the point that yesterday, or when this started 4 days ago, Lebanon said, we're staying out of it. And then Syria yesterday, you can use our airspace. And if you just hold that thought, because we have a new sound from President Trump, he was just asked about the possibility of regime change in Iran, and we can listen to that, and then we'll come back around to Kennedy.
I want to see no nuclear weapon in Iran, and we're well on our way to making sure that happens.
And a short comment, Kennedy, I wasn't sure how long that would be. Your thoughts?
Yes, I think he shares that sentiment with the entire Western world. No one wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon because, this is not the era of détente, of mutually assured destruction, where, there were countries stockpiling nuclear weapons for defensive reasons. Iran has talked about going on the offense, and part of the existence of this regime is the desire to annihilate Israel, which is right next door. Think about it. What if Canada what if the reason for being for Canada was to destroy and obliterate the United States? I was recently on a Holocaust tour in Poland, and we visited the extermination camps. And, that took years for Nazi Germany to exterminate 6 million Jews and 3 million Catholic Poles. Iran wants to do what Hitler started with one bomb, and that's the fear. So Israel has started this, and now what the United States has to ask itself, are we going to be the ones who finish it? Because it will, if you're talking about the main enriching site for uranium, the Fordow site, that will take the kind of bunker buster that Israel does not have. I spoke to a former Navy SEAL senior chief, and he said, yes, Israel does have bunker busting bombs, but not the massive type where it'll take a pair with a B-2 bomber in order to completely obliterate that facility. That is a possibility if the United States wants to get involved. Iran does not want the U.S. to get involved because they know it is not only the end of their nuclear program, but also their petroleum program as well. So what does Iran have left? What they're clinging on to now is the desperate hope they will, with some of their other Middle East partners, be able to move forward capitalistic in a way that takes them out of petroleum, but into the economic future. They can't do that as an authoritarian, theocratic regime relying solely on oil.
Greg Gutfeld.
This is a tough one. You know, is Trump's actions a violation of the Trump doctrine, which is America first? I think that's the debate that's kind of raging among the right. But you elected Trump because you trust him. Yep. He's been consistent on everything, pretty much everything here and there. He's directionally consistent. I don't remember him being for any wars. He was outspoken about most of them. So I think to say, oh, now he's a neocon is unfair. He wouldn't do this unless he thought it had to be done. So you kind of have to give him the benefit of the doubt, which you cannot do with Iran. Iran is like the T-1000. In the second Terminator movie, you'd knock down its nuclear capabilities and it reconstitute itself. And so your only hope is that you make the time it takes to reconstitute longer and longer. You're not kicking the can down the road, you're kicking Tehran down the road. And it's like whether or not you want to do it now, you have to weigh the benefits. I don't want to sound wishy-washy, but, it's all about frame of reference. Israel has the Holocaust. That is their frame of reference. This is not going to happen again. If Israel was around before, there wouldn't have been a Holocaust. But then the other frame of reference is Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan. We were promised an end to that. So somehow you've got to start fresh with this and try to push the backstory of history off on the side. I don't know if that's possible, but, if you're going to trust somebody, I would trust Trump and not Iran. That's where I'm at.
In addition.
Exactly. When people say Trump promised no new wars, this isn't a war, actually. People say, well, Trump promised America first. This is America first. As an American, do you want Iran to have a nuclear weapon? Just think to yourself. They've shouted and chanted death to America. And you want them to have a nuclear weapon? This is America first. You protect your people by any means necessary.
So we go to a Fox News alert. Israel says it has eliminated 4 senior intel officials, including the IRGC's head of intelligence. This is the Quds Force headquarters, we believe.
It comes as Iranian missile strikes kill at least 8 and injured hundreds more as rocket fire rained down on central and northern Israel overnight.
Trey Yingst is live in Israel with the latest. Good morning, Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. Overnight missiles rained down across Israel, killing at least 8 people, some of them slipping past missile defense systems at 5 different locations, destroying both apartment buildings and residential blocks. We got to one scene in the heart of Tel Aviv, just blocks away from the U.S. Embassy branch here that was also damaged in that strike. And when we got there, first responders were rushing into the flames, trying to look for survivors in the rubble. We spoke with one man named Gal. Here's what he had to say.
When the missiles arrived, we were in the staircase in the building. And the shock was so huge. I never saw even a piece of a rocket. And to see an explosion right in front of my face and my other face, crazy.
A ballistic missile has just slammed into a building in the center of Tel Aviv. Right now, first responders are trying to put out the flames in the distance. You can see right now there are a variety of paramedics on the scene, police officers and soldiers. And if you come over here, you'll see part of a collapsed building. They don't know if anyone is currently inside, but they are checking right now. The Iranians continue to launch waves and waves of ballistic missiles into this country. Overnight, we understand there were 65 missiles, and they were targeting a variety of locations. We could hear the explosions in Tel Aviv as some were intercepted overhead by Israel's advanced missile defense systems. The Israelis are striking back, taking out top intelligence officials from the Iranian regime, including the country's chief intelligence officer and his deputy. They also took out what they say are 1/3 of the ballistic missile launching positions. Despite the fact the Israelis say they now have air superiority over the Iranian capital of Tehran, this is expected to continue for a number of days, if not weeks, as Israeli forces are trying to weaken the Iranian regime and target the country's nuclear facilities. Guys, back to you.
Hey, Trey, would you say the number of ballistic missiles, rockets, and drones are leveling off from night after night after night? Because that's what Israel is banking on, that they're going to locate the launchers, they're going to run out of rockets, they can't replenish, and they have no air defense. So is that happening?
Look, the Iranians appear to be preserving what missiles they have left. We spoke with a senior Israeli intelligence official over the weekend who indicated the assessment is that Iran has around 2,000 ballistic missiles. And the Israelis have been able to take out some of the stockpile. They've been able to target, like I said, 1/3 of the launching positions. But this still gives Iran the capability to fire hundreds of ballistic missiles into this country. And that is why Israel is still in a state of emergency. The airport is closed, and they are bracing for challenging days ahead. Officials speaking with Fox News say there will be more casualties, there will be more destruction. And you see in the aftermath videos here, these are not like the rockets that came from Gaza or from southern Lebanon. These are missiles that can take out entire blocks in major cities like Tel Aviv. And from what we saw last night, and I was being very careful as we arrived on the scene less than an hour after the explosion, of describing where it was. But now we can report, because U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee came out publicly and said there was minor damage to the U.S. Embassy branch here in Tel Aviv. This is a residential area. It is packed with civilians, cafes and restaurants. And when we got there, for blocks, you could see storefronts that were completely ripped apart, glass shards all over the street from windows that were blown out. And so to answer your question, the Iranians are preserving what supply they have left. They certainly are in a position where eventually they will run out of ballistic missiles, but Israel is certainly not out of the woods yet, and we can expect more Israeli strikes throughout the day as they try to mitigate that risk of ballistic missile fire toward major cities like Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and the northern city of Haifa.
So, Trey, I'm curious. These missiles that the Iranians are firing, do they have targets? Or are they just shooting them out there? So the reason why I ask this is because, number one, they're hitting civilians. And number two, when it comes to that embassy area that belongs to the United States, essentially, would they have known that's where that missile was going to hit?
Yes, they have precision-guided munitions, and they know broadly where they are firing these. And without getting into too many details about some of the targets that were hit, I can broadly tell you that the Iranians are going after military and civilian targets. Now, with that said, the Israelis are striking in a much more precise manner when they hit Iran. They go after military leadership. Certainly civilians have been killed in Iran, but the focus of Israeli strikes, it's IRGC targets and it's nuclear program-linked targets, along with the country's ballistic missile program. When the Iranians fire these barrages of missiles, they're often hitting densely populated areas. And as we saw earlier in the day yesterday, at a different location that had been hit, the entire half of an apartment building collapsed after one of these missiles struck an area and killed 2 children, along with 2 adults, and many other people were injured. And just to give you a sense of the scene, because we often talk about the missiles and we talk about the ability to intercept them and how many are being fired by Iran, but the people that are paying the price, it's Israeli civilians. And when we arrived at that scene earlier in the day yesterday, separately from where you saw that insert where I spoke with the wounded man, we saw a son, and he was wearing a hospital gown because he had been taken from the rubble to a local hospital, and he demanded that the doctors and nurses release him, despite the fact that he was wounded, because his father was still buried under the debris. And we brought you that story yesterday, but unfortunately his father was killed. His body was pulled from the rubble later in the day after we left that area. And it speaks to the people who are affected here. They are civilians, they're family members. No Israeli soldiers have been killed in the Iranian response. A few have been lightly wounded, but largely we're talking about civilians. According to the Israelis, 24 of them have been killed since Friday night when the Israelis launched this campaign targeting the Iranian regime. And so as we move forward here, this is really important to talk about the distinction between the target list here for the Iranians and the Israelis. But we expect very difficult days ahead, given the fact that the missile defense system here is not perfect. And while they're able to shoot down a lot of the incoming fire, that also includes attack drones, these suicide Shahed drones that the Russians also use in their war against Ukraine. Their goal here is to overwhelm Israel's missile defense system. And we've been out here on this balcony reporting live as these missile defense systems are active over Tel Aviv. And we have watched as these missiles slam into this city. And the destruction that they cause is oftentimes catastrophic. If you're standing outside, you don't even need to be hit by the missile. You could just be a few blocks away and be killed by the blast wave.
All right, so Trey, two questions for you. What's the feel there in Israel? What are the people who live there, the residents, saying about this attack on Iran and vice versa? And then also, what's the biggest fear? What is left? What should Israel and even America be scared of that is left in Iran? Is it more leaders? Is it the Ayatollah, the supreme leader? Is it Fordo, the nuclear site?
Yeah, look, the Iranians have two pieces of leverage left, and they're not relatively strong compared to what they had when you think back 2 years ago when their proxies were very active in the region, like Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza, or the Houthis in Yemen. These groups have been largely decimated by both the Israeli campaign and then in Yemen, partially the American campaign. So they don't have the proxies to respond. So they're relying on two things: the country's ballistic missile program that is limited. They can certainly cause damage, but eventually they will run out of missiles. And then they have the ability to ratchet up what's left of their nuclear program. Now, the Israelis have targeted two key facilities, the Natanz facility and the Isfahan facility. These are locations where the Iranians were, according to Israeli officials, pursuing ballistic missiles, but they were pursuing, more importantly, according to the Israelis, nuclear weapons. And they were enriching uranium up to 60% purity, very close to weapons-grade material. And that is one of three reasons the Israelis say they launched this campaign. The big X factor here is the Fordow facility. This is their main facility. It is deep underground. And according to initial reports and officials that we've talked to over the past almost decade here, they say they don't have all of the munitions needed. Now, we should note, overnight, there was some movement of American interest in American planes to the region. There are real questions, and when you ask about Israeli civilians and officials, this is the question that everyone has. Will the Americans get more directly involved? I spoke with a very high-ranking Israeli intelligence official over the weekend. We had an extensive 30-minute conversation, and we got into the details of this. He stopped short at talking about what the American support looks like. He said right now he can tell me the Americans are helping to shoot down these incoming ballistic missiles. And I said, well, in terms of military activity, what does that look like? Are you encouraging the Americans to get involved? And he stopped, he paused, and he said, I can tell you the Americans are not our colleagues. They are our friends. We would not be as successful as we are if we did not have the support of the Trump administration. But he didn't want to go into the details about possible American involvement in striking the Iranian regime. It is certainly possible. And when we talk to people in the streets, they're encouraging it. They want this to be over as quickly as possible. And they know that American involvement could lead to that. And so in the days ahead, we will look out to see if there is more movement of American forces in the region to prep for a possible strike. But one thing that we should note here, the Iranians have stopped short of doing one other thing that they can do. They have not directly targeted American bases in the region, and they've not targeted embassies in the region, like the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. This is important because it's a tactical decision on their part. They don't want the Americans involved. But we've heard President Trump, and he said just yesterday, sometimes you have to let them fight it out. And that's exactly what's happening right now.
But, Trey, for the most part, the nuclear plants, they hit all four of them. But it looks like Natanz and Fordo, nobody thinks that they've been disabled yet. The IAEA weighed in and said from their monitors in Vienna, they think they're still intact. So you could never stop this operation if your objective is to get rid of their nuclear program now. It's not done.
It's certainly not done if their objective is to destroy the country's nuclear program. The IAEA came out today and said they didn't have any evidence of material that was leaking. That is one thing that they monitor in the region. It's just part of their job here in the Middle East. But the other thing is that when you think about these facilities, many of them are deep underground. And again, this is the leverage that the regime still has left. They can say, we're going to pull out of the current treaty that they're a part of to have oversight for their nuclear program. At this point, a lot of this conversation about leverage at the negotiating table is quite frankly irrelevant because there's a war happening between Israel and Iran right now. Now, the Trump administration, including the president, has been clear they'd like Iran to come back to the negotiating table, but Israeli officials say they're not done. They have many targets they still want to hit. Iran is a very large country. The regime has been preparing for this possibility of a direct war with Israel for decades. And so the job will likely continue from an Israeli perspective. As for the country's nuclear program, the question is, as the Israelis continue to hit Iran, and if the Americans get more directly involved, will the regime say, look, we want to come back to the table and we want to have an agreement? They were supposed to have a 6th round of nuclear talks just yesterday, and of course those were canceled as a result of this conflict.
Trey, great job. You were just on a few hours ago reporting live from a bomb scene. Thanks.
Great information.
Yeah, I just don't think there's any way we should have talks now. You had your chance for talks. You can't. Now you're going to talk to try to preserve what's left of your nuclear program. So what? We can remove sanctions? There's you can't take them seriously.
The president still wants to give peace a chance, especially when you talk about the escalation where the supreme leader could be taken out, and then that starts a whole religious war because Iran wants to unite the Muslim world. And I think if you take out the supreme leader, that happens. So he wants to give him one more shot. Do you want peace? Or it can escalate.
Yeah, he wants de-escalation right now. He wants a deal. He says he does foresee that a deal will be done.
And this is the thing. Trump gave them 60 days,
So this morning, President Trump letting those anti-ICE
back in the United
protesters know
States.
He's had enough.
Donald Trump posting, quote, "We must expand efforts to detain and deport illegal aliens in America's largest cities, such as LA, Chicago, and New York, where millions of illegal aliens reside. I have directed my entire administration to put every resource possible behind the effort and reverse the tide of mass destruction migration."
Yep, New York City Mayor Eric Adams joins us now. Ms. Mayor, 50,000 came out for the No Kings Day over the weekend. There was really no incidents. 34,000 NYPD officers out there. What was your approach? Did you learn anything from the way LA didn't handle it, the way you handled it?
And also when you had marches in the past, and this was a very unique march where you had people coming from different parts of the city, 50,000, 14 arrests, no injuries to any member of service or to the protesters. And what's important, we use technology, drones, that allowed us to monitor the entire crowd and intel. We knew that there were outside agitators that wanted to disrupt. They were someone wearing masks and covering, and we zeroed in on them. We were very proactive in this entire
How do you even
initiative.
prepare for something that large? And tell us about the people that were arrested. Were they violent?
No, they committed disorderly conduct type crimes. Several of them received summonses, others received desk appearance tickets, and one actually went through the system. So what we did differently is that, number one, the drones were amazing because it allowed us to police this not only from the ground but in the air. If you see a crowd of people with gas masks on, face masks on, now we had our folks watching them and staying in contact with what they were doing. So we were going after those numbers that were trying to break the law.
What do you make of the premise of the marches? Because they're saying, as a cop, they're saying until the ICE raids stop, then they're not going to stop. So they're going to prevent the raids from happening, which is what started in LA. They have a lawful warrant signed by a judge to pick people up, and they're saying they're going to impede it, and they're going to continue to protest until those stop.
And watch what happened here in the city. I can't speak for other municipalities, but I was clear with the commissioner, and the commissioner was clear with her troops. You're not going to impede federal authorities for taking their actions, and that's what we were able to accomplish. So when you were those who were sitting in the roadway, blocking...
Every single thing Trump is doing right now, he campaigned on it. He spoke about Iran. Ladies and gentlemen. He spoke about deportation. Now people are protesting, stop ICE. We don't want ICE in our cities. All right. Do we want Iran to have a nuclear weapon? Well, Trump shouldn't get involved. Okay. What do you want this guy to do? Just sit down in the Oval Office and do nothing? Yeah, I don't think so.
Trucks, blocking pedestrians, or blocking parents from wanting to go to the job, as we saw one of those videos. It's not going to happen in the city. We took the right actions throughout this entire initiative. And I communicated with the governor and the administration to say, in New York City, we have the manpower to handle this problem.
So let's talk about the race. You're not going for the Democratic nomination because you got elected as a Democrat. You said, I'm going to run as an independent. And you might be open to Republicans. But there was a big debate over the last few days. Well, Mamdani and Cuomo are 1 and 2 in this. Here's AOC. To show how divided the Democrats are, here's AOC talking about how Cuomo is the problem.
Andrew Cuomo has made clear that if he wins this race, he wants to run for president of the United States of America. And in a world and a nation that is crying to end the gerontocracy of our leadership, that wants a new day, that wants to see a new generation ascend. It is unconscionable to send Andrew Cuomo to Gracie Mansion once again.
And Mamdani is one she supports, who's a socialist who wants to give away everything.
Defund the police.
Defund the police. Your reaction to these New Yorkers?
I equate this like the basketball. This is the season. The playoff is going to happen after this primary. They're going to be appear 3 people in the playoff. Andrew, Mamdani, and Eric Adams and Curtis Lee. The New York Times came out today and said, don't do Mamdani, don't do Cuomo. I turned this city around. They don't want to admit it. That's fine, but the voters are going to acknowledge that, and I want to be on the ground. You can't defund police. You can't be anti-business. You can't just start raising taxes when you don't have the authority to do so. And so having a clear message is going to be an interesting campaign season.
I think, Mr. Mayor, a lot of people are waiting for the moment you take off the gloves because you got a Democratic Party that tried to crush you. All because you wanted to cooperate with the president of the United States, all because they were trying to bankrupt this city, having illegals in this town. You have to do the hotels, provide food, housing, then crime was out of control. So are you going to expose what they tried to do to you?
Over and over again, because you're right, what they tried to do, and it's very clear. And then to hold up the dismissal until the day before the submission of my petition. I had 25,000 petitions. Judge Ho held up the dismissal that his independent person stated into the day before. That's why we had to run on an independent line and raise more petitions in the street. And of course, that's a lot of money. And so it's about sharing what happened, why I fought for New Yorkers. I'll say over and over again, they weren't coming from me. They were coming from the people of the city, and I was in the way. And now I'm going to be able to get that message out.
It was your party.
Okay, Trump. Okay, Trump. Relax. Okay. Everybody's using Trump's language. Okay, relax. They were coming for you, but truly, they were coming for New Yorkers. Okay, relax. We get you. Okay, you can come home to the Republican Party, but relax with all that.
It turned on you.
It was.
Yes. Yeah. And let's think about this for a moment. In all of our parties, you find that there are a diverse level of opinion. That party is not monolithic. The overwhelming number of Democrats in this city, they believe with me that 79% stated that if you commit a crime and you are undocumented after you serve your time, you should be deported. 79%. They believe in me in supporting our police. They believe in pro-business. They believe in not having a revolving door criminal justice system. The numerical minority, like AOC and others, they'd allow this, but they're not the majority. These are working class people in this city, and they want a working class mayor.
Yeah, break down the numbers in New York. Where do we normally, who votes in which direction? Because you have all these Democrats it's open polls right now for the Democratic primary. You're running as an independent, you're running against a few others, and then you have the Republican Party and Curtis is running. What separates you, if conservatives are watching that live in New York City and can vote for you, what separates you from Curtis?
Well, a lot. First of all, the ability to manage a city this complex. I navigated this city through COVID, through 237,000 15,000 migrants and asylum seekers. We have more businesses in our city in the city history. Broadway had the best 12 months in the recorded history of the city. More housing in individual years in the history of the city. Our children are outpacing the state in reading and math. Managing law enforcement. Last 5 months, we had the lowest number of homicides and shooters in recorded history. 20,000 illegal guns off the streets.
Right.
Managing this city, you need someone that understands the complexities of the city.
By the way, Mamdani's surging, and in the ranked choice voting, he's got a real shot of beating Cuomo. You said that Cuomo's really at the nexus of all bad decisions. When you talk about the funding the police, he was part of that. When you talk about
Nursing
no
homes,
cash
the
bail,
nursing homes.
the no cash bail, that was him.
I could give you the list better than you can, because you're right. You know, I fixed his mess. 15,000 people died in nursing homes. Cuomo. Closing psychiatric beds, and that's how we have many people on our streets right now. Cuomo. Putting in place the cannabis legislation, where I had to close 1,400 illegal cannabis shops that he opened. Cuomo. Did the cash bail, revolving door criminal justice system. Cuomo. I can go down the list, and then he comes now and said, I made a mistake. I would have done it differently. That's not how this is done. Your era almost hurt this city.
Do you believe when Joe Biden, just to switch, did Joe Biden abandon, do you think he was in charge of the administration? You said I was a Biden disciple, basically.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, he doesn't even take a meeting with you, won't meet with you. FBI takes your phone. They start
kicked you off the
investigating
presidential
Do you believe that he was making those decisions? Do you ever get him on the phone? Because there's a sense that he was not running the country.
I met the president twice. And we all know when you're the chief executive, there are many decision makers that are in the midst. We all know that there were some cognitive issues that the president was dealing with.
You picked it up.
I don't know how things were being actually carried out those last few months or last few years. I don't know that. When I sat down with the president, I told him, and I said, Mr. President, whatever they're telling you about the migrants and asylum seekers issue is wrong. We need to secure our borders. We need to make sure we stop the flow in cities like Chicago, Denver, New York, and Houston. His administration, whoever was in the middle individuals, I believe, felt as though we need to have, Eric is not a good Democrat. I was a good New Yorker, and I was a good American, and I was fighting for this city.
So you said it to him, but he had no response, and the middle guys got it.
Mr. Mayor, what's your biggest challenge as mayor, and why do you want to have this job again?
Well, I have to continue with the success. There's a reason bond raters, who are the outside independent observers, there's a reason they looked at this city and said, we're going to raise the bond for Eric Adams, and we're going to keep that raised bond in place. They know I turned this city around. What I inherited in 2021 was unbelievable where we are now. This city is in a much better place, and we're going to continue the success that we're doing.
Mr. Mayor, do you regret your former party being a part of it? Because there's a lot of Americans that are out there that said it went too far. It's too far left. It's not common sense, men and women's sports, allowing the borders. I mean, you were very critical of my governor in Texas about the border there, but once they got here, you realize how crazy it was for the citizens. Exactly. So did the party go too far left, and do you think it's repairable?
First of all, now I understand where your tone come from. I thought that was a Brooklyn
that's
accent.
all Texas.
No, but you're right. The extreme arm of the party did go too far. I say it all the time. I didn't leave the party left me. The party left working class people. When they were starting to call in the President Hitler and other fascists, I said, that's not what working class people are concerned about. We need to talk about affordability, housing, public safety, these bread and butter issues. It has gone too far left, an arm of the party, and far too many working class people are saying, start talking about my issues.
Real quick, is Cuomo going to win the primary?
I'm not concerned which one of them are winning. I'm ready for whoever comes. But remember, he is on the independent line also, so he would be in the general election, no matter what.
Oh, okay.
Madani will also be in the general election, no matter what. He's on the Working Families Party. So all of them are following my...
It's a complicated system.
Wow, I did not know that.
They're following what I did.
Well,
people say, Eric, you can't win on the independent, then why is everyone else following what I did? I'm a sitting mayor running on the independent line. That's a different scenario. Historically, independents are individuals who are unknown.
Gotcha.
This is a different race. I'm a sitting mayor. running on the independent line that even the New York Times stated, don't vote for the other two
And
guys.
Bloomberg won as an independent.
We hope
after
you
winning
come
as a
back,
Democrat.
Mr. Mayor. We appreciate
Y'all
you.
come back now, you
Yeah.
hear? We stay in the
That's
South.
right.
November.
Thank you for tuning in to the live show. You know what time it is. Of course, the great, smart C. Shelley, everything you're saying, absolutely incredible, insightful, impactful. But we live in a world where peace is so expensive. It is so expensive. And if you go back to the days of Jesus, because I know a lot of us here are Christians, Jesus said people will be divided, even families. Don't forget. Okay, don't forget. I get it. We want peace in this world, but it's almost impossible. As much as I want peace, it's just almost impossible to get peace because everybody has different languages, different upbringing, different ideologies, different religions, different beliefs. Some people don't want women to go to school or have formal education. Some people don't believe kids should be let outside. Some people don't believe so many things. And it's like, it's just, you can say, let them be who they are. But when they bring the issue to your front door, what do you have to do? What are you going to do? You're going to have to fight back. I get it. I get it. It's a very sensitive situation. When you see people losing their stuff, their homes, their houses, it's a lot. It's a lot.
The Israeli Air Forces controls the skies over Tehran. This changes the entire campaign. We are on the path to achieving our two objectives, eliminating the nuclear threat and eliminating the missile threat. When we control the skies over Tehran, we strike those targets, regime targets, unlike the criminal Iranian regime that targets our civilians.
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu speaking at an airbase this morning. The IDF says it destroyed more than 20 surface-to-surface missiles in an overnight strike. It says a third of the regime's missile launchers have now been dismantled. A long line of cars seen leaving Tehran as the fighting intensifies.
And I just want to say this before we keep going. If some of you read the Bible or are Christians, I just want to share this Bible verse. Okay, I get it. This isn't like a Christian church service, but it is what it is. I'm going to quote this Bible verse, okay? In Luke 12:51, Jesus said, this is Jesus, okay? This ain't no regular dude. This is Jesus. Jesus said, "Do you think I came to bring peace on earth? No, I tell you, but division. From now on, there will be 5 in one family divided against each other, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. And in Matthew 10:34, Jesus states, "Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword." This is the New Testament. This isn't the Old Testament, ladies and gentlemen. But then again, Jesus said, "I have given you no higher commandment than to love your neighbor as yourself." But he also said other things as well. So here we go.
You can see that there. And this all comes as Israel looks to cripple the regime's nuclear program, which it calls an existential threat. Israeli President Isaac Herzog joins us from Jerusalem. There is a slight delay, so bear with us. And, sir, thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Prime Minister Netanyahu says that you're close to achieving the two objectives in this mission. Do you need American military support in order to complete those objectives?
So thank you, Dana, and thank you, Bill, from Jerusalem. I'm calling you and speaking to you. And I believe that, your viewers and you know that Israel is the closest ally of the United States of America, and America is the closest ally of the State of Israel, and we share joint national security interests on many fields, but the American administration will take its decisions and Israel will take its decisions. We had no choice. We had a clear and imminent threat on an Iranian nuclear program that has rushed to the bomb. In recent months, broke almost into the bomb by both armament and enrichment. And as President Donald Trump himself reiterated time and again that Iran must not have the bomb and must not have this capability, we saw that whilst they were negotiating, they also were doing undercover operations to get to the bomb. And that is why we took this decision following a historic change of Israeli governments who've taken this decision in the past to make sure that none of our enemies have the bomb.
Mr. President, during this war, can Iran go nuclear? Can they fuel a bomb amidst this war on day 4 already?
As far as I know, I don't think it's feasible. I think that would be a very dangerous development. We are trying with all our might and capabilities and our heroic fighters and pilots to make sure that they don't get there, but rather that we delay, postpone, undermine their capability of getting to the bomb. We've carried out a massive operation. This operation strengthens the security and well-being of the free world, not only Israel. This operation prevents Iran from being on the doorstep of Europe with a huge nuclear program. And let's understand, we know for 80 years the world has decided and made clear that nukes are the most dangerous of all, and has decided and made clear for decades already that Iran must not have a nuclear capability. And even recently, just a few days ago, the International Atomic Agency in Vienna made clear in a decision of its Board of Governors, a historic, unprecedented decision, that Iran is violating all its agreements with the international community in this respect. That is why we had to take this operation. We did not seek that war. We never want this war. But unfortunately, since October 7th, we've been dealing with an empire of evil, all orchestrated from Tehran.
The proxies of Iran have been degraded, mostly thanks to the work of Israel, Hezbollah, Hamas. And I'm curious if you have any update on the discussions about the hostages who are still being held in Gaza.
So, we have 53 hostages, and I'm grateful to President Trump and his administration for working tirelessly to get them out of Gaza, including, of course, our people, our negotiating teams. We've accepted all offers of the mediators in the last few months. We said yes, and Hamas said no. So we're operating in Gaza to bring them back home. But the lesson of Gaza is a lesson to the entire free world, which is convening in Canada today at the G7 summit. Let's understand, if you enable such an enemy to raise its head and develop such an infrastructure for decades, then you wake up one morning and you see that the jihadist ideology of trying to reign over the Middle East, to be its ruler, is moving forward. And what we are doing right now is we are trying to move away and enable other peace forces, other nations in the region, together with Israel, to offer a better hope. I sincerely want our Palestinian neighbors to have a better life. I sincerely want our Arab neighbors to have a better life. But we in Israel are bombarded day in, day out by Iranian missiles, and before that by Houthi Yemenite missiles, and before that with Hezbollah missiles, and before that Hamas missiles. It's all started in Tehran. It's all financed by Tehran. It's all armed by Tehran. And we have to understand this is a clear threat to world stability and Middle East stability.
Sir, I don't know what the latest numbers are. The numbers I have is 300 ballistic missiles approximately fired toward Israel, of which many have been intercepted, but others have gotten through and caused casualties on the ground there. Perhaps the Iranians have 1,000 more. Maybe the number's higher. I do not know. But eventually, Iran runs out of ballistic missiles. Israel is not going to occupy the country of Iran. What happens when they reach the end of the line of the ballistic missile threat to Israel?
So as Prime Minister Netanyahu said today, our pilots are flying all over Iran. Indeed, these missiles are machines to kill citizens. I mean, they're like spraying Israel with missiles every night in order to harass Israelis. Unfortunately, innocent lives were taken, innocent Israelis killed in their bedrooms, in their shelters, from toddlers to old age, 94-year-old Holocaust survivor today. So we have to understand that this is a war which we are trying to eradicate a threat. They are trying to kill civilians. And all I say is to the world, if you want to de-escalate, get the goddamn nukes out of Tehran's hands. And bring a new change, bring a new direction, bring a different direction for the day after. We should think about the day after. And I am confident and I trust the administration, the U.S. administration, for moving forward with plans. But for that, we all have to show unanimity in our cause and objective to make sure that Iran does not have nuclear weapons.
President Trump shares that, and he said this yesterday at the White House.
Mr. President, can you give us a sense of what you're doing to try to de-escalate the situation between Iran and Israel?
Well, I hope there's going to be a deal. I think it's time for a deal, and we'll see what happens. But sometimes they have to fight it out, but we're going to see what happens. I think there's a good chance there'll be a deal.
Given the reality on the ground right now and in the air, as you just said, what do you think the chances of a deal are for Iran at this point?
Look, it's a psychological and physical and emotional challenge. But we're a very strong and resilient nation, and we've shown immense capabilities. And that is why, at the end, the Iranians will have to understand that they cannot go through terror again. They cannot spread havoc and terror for decades in the Middle East. They cannot radicalize nations. They cannot plant terror cells all over the world. And they cannot go nuclear. And I hope that the Iranian people will wake up, because they are coerced by a terrible regime. And I hope they will raise their voices clear and loud. So I think now, when the G7 summit is convening in Canada, it should be top priority on two things. No way Iran going nuclear. Secondly, bring back our hostages as soon as possible. I believe that bringing the hostages back home will be the key to the door to opening a different horizon in our region. That is what I told world leaders. You want to change reality everywhere, also in Gaza. We want to. But for that, bring our hostages and bring a path forward.
Mr. President, one last question here. The Ayatollah is in charge of the Iranian country and the Iranian people now. Is there a back channel of communications by which Israel can communicate effectively with the Iranian leadership now?
I don't know. We are dealing with very cruel people who've spread terror. So I don't know if there's any way of a dialogue, but you know that there are countries that are willing to speak to the Iranian leadership on find a way and a path forward. We never had war with the Iranian people. On the contrary, we always had great respect for them. They're a huge people. They're a nation with great history. Many Jews came from Iran. You want to know something which is really inquisitive for me in terms of how I see facts. Yesterday I visited Rishon LeZion, a beautiful city in the heart of Israel which was bombarded by missiles, and I visited a family of 3 generations who were saved by miracle from the missile that totally eradicated their home. They came from Isfahan. They're Jews who came from Isfahan originally, from Iran. So I think, at the end, we should all live in peace in this region. But for that, you have to stop an empire of evil, because that's what they do all day long. They take the people's money and spend it on killing people all over the region. Why would a small, tiny tribe like the Houthis in Yemen, 50,000 people, have ballistic missiles, have cruise missiles. They've been fed up and filled up with ammunition of empires, of big countries. That means that the world has to rise up and say to the Iranians, no more.
Sir, thank you for your time. The President of Israel, live in Jerusalem.
Thank you for tuning into the live show. It's a complicated situation, but this is what we do. We are allowed to have our own opinion and have a dialogue. All right, BB.
Defend Israel from drone and missile strikes launched by Iran. The two sides trading more attacks overnight as that conflict continues to escalate. Jennifer Griffin, live from the Pentagon, brings us up to speed from her post now. And Jennifer, hello.
Hi, Bill. The Israelis, using American-made F-35 stealth fighter jets, did in less than 4 days something that the Russian Air Force has been incapable of doing in Ukraine for 3.5 years. It established air superiority. That means Israeli non-stealth F-15 and F-16 fighter jets can now carry out airstrikes and hunt down the mobile ballistic missile launchers that are terrorizing Israeli cities. 2 U.S. Navy-guided missile destroyers, the USS Sullivans and USS Arleigh Burke in the eastern Mediterranean, have been shooting down Iranian missiles aimed at Israel. The Navy has ordered the USS Thomas Hudner for backup, along with a 4th Navy destroyer. And we have now learned the aircraft carrier strike group, the USS Nimitz, on its final sea voyage will deploy from the Pacific. Deeply symbolic, since it was the Nimitz deployed in 1980 and its helicopters that were part of the failed U.S. effort to rescue the American hostages held at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. The U.S. has been in a shadow war against Iran ever since. Israel may not be able to reach the parts of Iran's nuclear program that are buried inside mountains and underground without U.S. help. U.S. B-2 bombers are the only air asset that can drop the 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs known as the Massive Ordnance Penetrator. Only the U.S. has them. When pressed on whether Trump had denied any military requests like the 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs delivered by those B-2 bombers needed to hit Iran's deeply buried nuclear sites, Netanyahu deflected, saying it was President Trump's decision. Quote, I trust his judgment completely. That from Bret Baier's exclusive interview with the Israeli Prime Minister yesterday. Bill?
Thank you, Jennifer. Jennifer Griffin, the Pentagon, thank you. Dana?
And for more on all of this, we do have that special report anchor, Bret Baier, with us. And Bret, just as we were talking in the last few minutes, there is a new exclusive report from the Wall Street Journal that says this: a battered Iran signals it wants to de-escalate hostilities with Israel and negotiate as long as the United States stays out of the fight. This is just developing now. Let's get your take on it, since you are quite up to speed.
Yeah, good morning, Bill and Dana. I asked Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday about the Iran foreign minister talking to reporters, saying if Israel stops attacking, we will stop counterattacking and get to the table, suggesting that they were coming to the table. This is what the Iran foreign minister said, with a deal that possibly America would see as acceptable. The Prime Minister said that is essentially BS. He said that's just not true. It's a bunch of hogwash, in his words, that when they were coming to the table, he cited the Supreme Leader saying death to America, death to Israel, as that was happening. So I think there's a lot of skepticism about this outreach. That said, President Trump has said he does want to get back to the table if they're serious about agreeing to dismantlement.
Yeah, a couple of things here. It struck me what General Keane was arguing a moment ago when I asked specifically about that. The president of Israel, Herzog, was with Dana and me about half an hour ago. Fordow is apparently the most fortified nuclear site in the entire country of Iran. So far as we can tell, it's hard to reach. Half a mile buried beneath rock inside of a mountain. Here is President Herzog on the question of going nuclear in real time. Watch. Can they fuel a bomb amidst this war on day 4 already?
As far as I know, I don't think it's feasible. I think that would be a very dangerous development. We are trying with all our might and capabilities and our heroic fighters and pilots to make sure that they don't get there, but rather that we delay, postpone, undermine their capability of getting to the bomb.
don't want to get too far ahead of this, but Keen's argument is the United States has to use bunker buster bombs now to take out this facility. Otherwise, the Arab region looks at you and says, what was this war all about? In a year or two, you get to fortify that center yet again. Did Netanyahu go there with you?
I went many times to try to get that answer. I have heard privately that the ask has happened, but not the response. I don't know what the response is. Prime Minister Netanyahu wouldn't get that specific. It is true that the B-2 bomber is the only thing that can carry the 30,000-pound MOP, the massive ordnance penetrator, the bunker buster that can get into the half-mile deep mountain lair, if you will, of Fordow. And then Isfahan is another facility that's buried deeply and where enriched uranium is stored. So the Iranians have a couple of facilities that only U.S. technology could get to, and the real question is whether President Trump will decide that that's worth it now, and that's where this hinges.
You know, Russia apparently, according to wires, wants to be seen as a peacemaker in this situation, saying that it could help communicate between Israel and Iran, and yet it doesn't seem to want to be a peacemaker in its own region. You have President Trump in Canada today with the G7. They're likely to talk about Israel, and Zelensky is going to be in Canada as well. And I wonder how Russia fits into all of this.
Yeah, that's a great question, Dan. I mean, the fact that President Trump had this call loud and boisterous, and a lot of other leaders are going to make their feelings clear about both of these operations.
Yeah. Good to work with Netanyahu, and we'll see what we get today. Thank you, Brett.
All right.
We'll see you at 6 o'clock. Thank you.
Hey,
all right. I know it's not something that it's easy to say or see, but it's currently going on right now. Absolutely. All right, what else? You know, I get it if we're having dispute around the world, but when we have dispute on American soil, it's just not right. Here we go.
Rioters stormed an Oregon ICE office over the weekend, and they hurled fireworks, smoke grenades, rocks at federal agents. Several officers were hurt. Rioters used a stop sign as a battering ram and shattered a glass door of that building. Authorities officially declared a riot and made multiple arrests there. This has gone to a new level. Like that's not, there are no protesters. That's not what's happening out there. In fact, it's dangerous if you're out there trying to be a protester, I would imagine, because you got these guys among you. Los Angeles is ground zero for the anti-ICE protests and riots that have spread across the country. We know that. It started there, now it's moved elsewhere. Police there were again forced to battle with rioters over the weekend. Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE agents conducting raids, arresting people in this country illegally. That's your first crime. Do more when you get here, just a stronger reason to kick you out. President Trump posted this: "We must expand efforts to detain and deport illegal aliens in America's largest cities, such as Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, where millions upon millions of illegal aliens reside. These and other such cities are the core of the Democrat power center." And the Trump administration announced plans to conduct the single largest mass deportation program in U.S. history. Earlier this month, the White House reported that ICE has arrested more than 100,000 illegals so far this year. Kellyanne Conway, Fox News contributor, former senior counselor to President Trump. So this is on the move. No matter what the rioters or anybody else does, the president is targeting those here illegally, particularly the worst, the violent.
Well, this is very smart, and the White House is doing a masterful job at communicating to us regularly who exactly is being deported. They have this running list of the faces and the rap sheets and the names of examples. Everyone wants to pretend, everyone on the other side waving Mexican flags. I'm sure soon we'll see Iranian flags from them too, Harris. These animals who are hitting out and throwing things, committing crimes against law enforcement in Portland, in LA, and elsewhere. They don't understand that they want to say that Abuela, who's been here for 55 years, a law-abiding non-citizen, is being deported. No, it's these criminals. It's the worst of the worst. And going into the heart of it, where we have an epidemic of Democratic lawmakers in these major cities, Harris, looking the other way for years now. 1.4 million Californians have migrated out of the state of California. Well, why do you think that is? It's a beautiful state, unless you look at all the man-made problems. And I think Donald Trump is doing a favor to these cities who have feckless and reckless, and I think spineless mayors like Karen Bass helicoptering over literally above it all over the weekend. Some of these governors, they won't stand down. They won't stand up to their own base in the party. So Donald Trump's doing them a favor by saying, we're going to come in and root out the criminals. We're going to continue to deport people who are there in the millions. Look at what's happened, the strain on the welfare system, the health system, the schools, the law enforcement. The police force in LA itself is down measurably from just a decade ago, Harris, because they take early retirement. They feel like they're being literally spat upon, and worse, they're under-resourced, they're under-respected, and it starts with these lawmakers.
Which is endangering for the law enforcement.
What you're showing right now, live footage, a peaceful protest, really is part of the problem.
Yeah, I mean, can you call out reality? Look, you mentioned her, and my team got this. Here's Democrat Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass sticking with the talking points, and as Kellyanne said, from the comfort of a chopper.
I will tell you, the 30,000 people were downtown LA. There were protests in 15 different locations in our city. I flew over each one of them, and they were overwhelmingly peaceful. It's not shocking that at the end of a protest that you're going to have some confrontation. Of course, I wish there was none at all, but I don't think that characterized the day at all.
So why not walk on the ground?
Wow. Yeah, let me just remind everybody, no one on TV is under oath, that's for sure, including the mayor of Los Angeles, who barely won in the first place. Lost to a businessman, Harris, who I think did a great job during the fires as well. I mean, she's only been there for, what, a very short period of time. She couldn't handle the fires. She can't handle this. Yeah. But I think, look, this was the mandate. This is one of the many mandates for President Trump in the last election. 10 years ago today, he came to that elevator and talked about border security and illegal immigration. What a difference 10 years makes in that we need American strength and leadership from the top to send in our federal troops. And by the way, ICE is doing this, Harris, with pre-reconciliation, pre-big, beautiful bill resources. They're the ones with the limited resources. Some people, I think, they're not exactly cynics or skeptics. I think some smart people, Harris, make the point that some of these cities are sanctuary cities and sanctuary states to get more federal funding. But what did they do with it? They didn't root out the criminals. They've just thrown it more at the welfare system. They haven't solved the crime and the homelessness. And Harris, these are the same jurisdictions that allow theft. We've watched it all on camera on Fox News for years now. You can walk into a store, and if you only steal things under a certain amount of money, the guard can't stop you. The police can't prosecute you. People know that. They need to watch this. This is what's going to happen to you. These people are not heroes and saviors. They're burning American flags, waving Mexican flags, soon to wave Iranian flags, I'm convinced of it. And not just on our college campuses, but in the streets of our major cities. So look, this is an us versus them fight, and the them happen to be Democratic lawmakers. They should thank Donald Trump because their party is in disarray and dysfunction, and he's actually going to make some of these cities brighter, smarter, and more beautiful and safer in short time.
Yeah, the faster the better. There are a lot of small businesses that are under pressure in some of these cities, particularly in downtown Los Angeles, for example, that's been under this for 2 weeks. I mean, they're changing potentially economies, so President Trump wants to get in there quickly. A new opinion piece titled argues the city's progressive government set the stage for the LA riots. Some of what Kellyanne was just talking about. Here's a piece of it. Why was the city prone to ignite? Because progressive government policies, which ironically harm immigrants most of all, created a tinderbox. If Mr. Newsom and Ms. Bass cared about the welfare of immigrants, they'd clean up Los Angeles' lawless streets, fix its atrocious public schools, and stop their assault on businesses. So kind of echoing some of what we're saying, but putting it out there. I mean, Democrats have got to see reality, but I guess you can't if you're in a chopper.
No, you can't. The statistics speak for themselves. A great piece by Alicia Finley in the Wall Street Journal. And she also makes the point, I think the schools piece and the law enforcement point is very important. If you're an illegal immigrant here and you put your kids in the school, or you're hoping that the police will come and help you when you need that, these policies in the blue cities by Democratic lawmakers overwhelmingly have hurt those that they pretend they're helping. I think it's a numbers game for them, Harris. They just like to say, Trump believes this, so we believe that. And having a sanctuary state literally telling law enforcement, you can't arrest, you can't prosecute, you can't do your job, has hurt the very people they're pretending they're helping. If they cared about these people, they would do something about the homeless. They would do something about the human waste that we see on the streets from the homeless, that these school children in San Francisco, Los Angeles have had to step over to get to school. That's the richest irony of all. But look, I think the smartest mayors are the ones who are going to play ball and do work with this government. You see it. I even see it here in D.C., not on every issue, certainly, but Mayor Muriel Bowser, it's obviously a very smaller population
here in New York,
but
Mayor
she's
Adams.
trying to work with the federal government on a couple core issues to improve the affordability and livability of this city. My message to these Democratic governors and particularly mayors across the country is, you've got to work with this. Don't just take the money. Take the advice. People want this. That was the mandate. Law enforcement is incredibly important. Safe schools, healthcare system that works, et cetera. We don't have it in the blue states.
Yeah. Kellyanne, thank you so very much. It was an opportunity to really drill down on what could be, and we pray for that. Kellyanne Conway.
Hopefully, this protest that is most likely turning into riots, looting, stops. All right?
And we are back now with a Fox News alert. Areas of Los Angeles are now under a curfew from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. as protesters have been clashing with police for days. House Republicans have already launched an investigation into Governor Gavin Newsom and LA Mayor Karen Bass for failing to contain the chaos, while the far-left media is now running cover for the protesters. Watch.
I want to reiterate, this looks very intimidating. This has remained 100% peaceful as far as I have seen. They're messing with the horses. Guys, let's go. Let's back up here.
Time and space.
Whoa. Let's go.
And while LA burns, the media is insisting that everything is peaceful.
As you can see here, this is a peaceful protest. We the people serve no king. How you guys feeling?
Horrible.
Horrible. What was it like to hear those flashbangs just now?
Unnecessary. It was peaceful. We were in front of the federal building. We were peaceful.
Throughout the entire time we've been out here, people chanting, singing, dancing, remaining peaceful as they make their thoughts known, their voices heard on the Trump administration.
And it's not just LA. Anti-ICE riots continue to rage across the country. Last night, police in Seattle were forced to use tear gas to protect themselves, while rioters in Portland broke into an ICE facility. Multiple police officers were reportedly injured there. Now we're starting to learn more about the people involved in these riots, like this gentleman, illegal alien Emiliano Garduna Garcia. He was arrested for throwing a Molotov cocktail at an ICE officer in LA. These riots are all in support of the illegal migrants nabbed by ICE, whose crimes span from human smuggling to lewd acts with a child. And the left still insists that these protests are peaceful. You know, Dr. Siegel.
The protests have been largely peaceful, and much of the violence has been that does exist, has been provoked by the presence of officers on the streets that was completely unnecessary.
To say the city is burning is an insult. It's all a farce.
I flew over each one of them, and they were overwhelmingly peaceful.
And the media is pushing the same false narrative. A study from the Media Research Center shows that from June 11th to the 12th, CNN and MSNBC personalities insisted the anti-ICE demonstrations were peaceful 211 times.
Say it one more time.
211 times they were peaceful. Dr. Siegel, how can they do that? Is it that they're not seeing the same video images that we have all been seeing and covering for the better part of a week, more than a week now at this point? The Molotov cocktails that we're hearing are being hurled, the chunks of brick and concrete hurled at police officers. What gives? Why can't they talk about what's happening?
I think what they're doing is deliberately parading a camera on a peaceful street, showing 2 or 3 people and say, okay, pose, you're peaceful here, and deliberately staying away from the tear gas or the areas where they have to suppress violence. I mean, look, where's this starting from? It almost relates to our first topic, which is what's wrong with ICE, trying to do its job, which people that come into the country illegally. We're trying to bring the country back to a place with borders. It's okay to protest that, but don't try to pretend it's being done completely peacefully. The Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights of Los Angeles, CHRLA, they're saying that they're actually being intimidated by the police or by people trying to keep the peace. I check with emergency rooms throughout the state of California. They're not. That's not happening. So it's not that there's an intimidation or a violence on behalf of people trying to keep the peace here. That's not happening. And for sure, these are not completely peaceful protests.
And when you take a look out, speaking to the intimidation, Taylor, that Dr. Siegel just brings up, of course, we see law enforcement there. But when you take a look at some of the folks that are showing up to these protests, I was looking at photos and video earlier, faces covered, heads covered. They don't want you to know who they are. Right. They're using shields to build up their own barriers, using parking signs that say no parking here to kind of protect themselves. They're the ones that look pretty intimidating.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I love that you brought up who goes, the people who were there, the images that we're seeing, because I was talking with a lot of friends of mine, and first of all, 77 million people actually did vote for this. So as much as my friends on the left, and I have a lot of them, they keep saying after every time Trump wins, they go, okay, I'll listen. Let me listen. Let me open up my ears and see if I can try to understand the right. And then they all go to these protests because they're not listening. What I keep telling them is 77 million people actually did indeed vote for this. And this is a winning polling issue. If you look at all the polls, Griff, you know this from your time at the border, from January till now, this is a winning issue. But for me, Lydia, too, I always come back to the fundamentals of how I want to spend my weekends. It's faith, family, and friends. And I have a lot of friends who don't have faith or a nuclear family unit, and so they turn to politics as their faith. So when their candidate loses, that's like their God losing, and then they go out and protest because they can't handle it. For me, I'm still centered in my faith that if my candidate loses, I can still have a nice Saturday not protesting, but with my family and engaged in my faith. There's a certain...
That is absolute fact, because when Trump lost in 2020, of course, people weren't happy. People thought he won. He even said he thought he won the election. But you didn't see people protesting for days and days and days and saying no kings or whatever. That's why I'm asking liberals and everybody protesting out there saying no kings. What are you actually saying? What do you want with this protest? Do you want Trump to step down and say he's not being the president anymore? Or what else? What do you want actually?
Sense of centeredness, I think that some of people on the left lack, and they don't know how to cope, and so they decide to protest because they have nothing else going on.
Griff, I'm sure you've covered in your extensive career here with Fox News. I'm so glad you're here. But many a protest, many a riot, many of what we're seeing here, these types of demonstrations, and what we're hearing from Democratic lawmakers who are defending what we're seeing is that you wouldn't see these types of skirmishes, I'm sure they would say, downplaying it, if it weren't for Trump who escalated things by deploying the National Guard, by federalizing this issue. They're kind of playing like a chicken and the egg thing, right?
Well,
Do they have a point?
I think that really, and by the way, let me just say, nothing says peaceful protest like Molotov cocktails, concrete blocks and frozen water bottles being thrown at the officers and ICE agents, which, by the way, we are currently in a moment when there's a more than 400% increase in assaults on ICE agents. But I think, to your point, Lydia, I think it's driven by leaders like Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, talking about 1930s, comparing ICE to the Gestapo. You've got Governor Tim Walz likening to Gestapo, and you had on the local level a San Diego councilman, Sean Elo Rivera, saying that the ICE had a picture of ICE agents out on a raid, painted terrorist across it, and encouraged the public to fight back. And so the passion, as Taylor points out, is there, but the match that's lighting the blaze is really these leaders are tipping their hands to fight back, to resist.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to support.
All right. More update, ladies and gentlemen. More update. So this guy has been caught, the Minnesota guy.
News out of Minnesota, where Fox News can now confirm the gunman accused of shooting 2 state lawmakers and their spouses has been arrested. 57-year-old Vance Bolter is accused of assassinating Democratic Minnesota State Representative Melissa Horton and her husband, and severely injuring State Senator John Hoffman and his wife. Hoffman and his wife underwent surgery, and the lawmakers' homes were less than 10 miles apart. Investigators say early yesterday morning, Bolter, dressed like a police officer, came out of Hortman's home and fired at police before escaping. We're also learning police found a list of 70 names, including other lawmakers and abortion providers, in Bolter's car. That car also allegedly looked like a police car. Minnesota's Governor Tim Walz is calling the shooting a, quote, act of targeted violence. And President Trump is promising persecution to the fullest extent of the law. The FBI was offering a $50,000 reward for information leading to Bolter's arrest. Joining us now on the phone is former D.C. police detective and defense attorney, as well as a Fox News contributor, Ted Williams. Ted, we're just getting this information in the last 5 minutes or so. I want your take on what we're learning.
Well, what so far from what we know here, and this is all fluid at this time, but that there was a location where they found the automobile and they found what they believe was Bolter's cowboy hat, the cowboy hat that in many of the pictures that he was seen wearing. And as a result of that, law enforcement made a concentration on that part of Minnesota. And it is my understanding, and from what we've been told, there have here been an arrest. I'm somewhat surprised because I thought that with all that we know about Bolter, and we know quite a bit now about him, that he very much was going to resist and probably go out with suicide by cop. But apparently that did not materialize. All indications are that he's under arrest. That's good. That's good for the citizens there in Minnesota. And clearly, this tells me that there was excellent law enforcement work. We also know that there was a $50,000 reward that had been put out by the FBI. And we know that at certain times, from the time that he was alleged to have shot the two, Hoffman, and killed the Horstmans, that he's been on the run and that he had some contact with individuals. So I think what you're going to find here, and we should have, I'm sure, a press conference very soon.
Yeah, there's an 11:30.
What is taking place.
Yeah, we're expecting a news conference around 11:30, so in 45 minutes or so. So we should get more information then. Go ahead, Ted.
Well, again, as I said, and I'm very excited behind this because I was hoping that he could, if anything, be brought in without anybody being further injured, and specifically law enforcement officers that were pursuing him. And so as a result of good law enforcement work and possibly some help from citizens in the area, this man is now in custody where he certainly belongs.
You know, talk to me about the amount of time. It didn't seem like it took long, but the amount of time that it took
the authorities to capture this man. And not only that, but that has to be incredibly dangerous for him to be dressed as a police officer and for them to kind of go about that in a safe manner.
Well, it is, but from what we know, and at one stage there, he was, when he was alleged to have committed these offenses, he was dressed as a law enforcement officer. But we saw other pictures later of him dressed in other civilian clothes and wearing a cowboy hat. And so those were the last actual photos that we had of Bolter in some portions of Minnesota there. But then there was a press conference late this afternoon here where Minnesota authorities let it be known that they had found a car that they believe was associated with Bolter, and they also found a cowboy hat in the vicinity of where the car was located. So law enforcement then decided that they would concentrate on that area, and as a result of that, there has now been an arrest.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe.
I am glad this guy was caught because this isn't what America stands for. We are not a lawless country. We're not a country that do this type of nonsense. This is absolute trash because of your belief or your political party. This isn't what you should be doing. Okay? You could use your voice. You could start a YouTube channel. You could write an article. You could start a website. You could start a blog, a podcast, or whatever you want to do to say your opinion. But you shouldn't take the law into your hands and take somebody else's life. Impossible. Okay? That's just trash. All right, here we go.
57-year-old Vance Bolter, suspected of assassinating one Minnesota lawmaker and nearly killing another, was found overnight by police. He is said to have willingly turned himself over to officers after being found in a field.
Bolter exploited the trust our uniforms are meant to represent. That betrayal is deeply disturbing to those of us who wear the badge with honor and responsibility.
When this sort of evil is in one of our communities, that law enforcement comes together to put all of their resources together to make sure that that person is taken into custody.
Former federal prosecutor and Holtzman Vogel partner Jonathan Fahey joins me now. Jonathan, your reaction to the suspect's arrest?
Well, it's great news that he was arrested. I just saw it this morning, and it really does show probably strong coordination with both, state, federal, local law enforcement, and they did a great job catching this guy. But I think on that earlier clip you're showing, he really is, when they say the face of evil, there's nothing better to describe what this person did other than just pure evil, to go to someone's home, kill them, just for not that there would ever be a justification, but to just show up at their door, murder them in cold blood, just truly horrific, not only for them, but the entire community around them. So great news that he was caught. Great work by law enforcement there.
Yeah, and the suspected motive is that he was targeting people who support abortion rights. He does have an online presence, and it shows that he was a devout Catholic, a pastor who preached at a church in the Congo. And one of his Facebook posts said he sought out militant Islamists in order to share the gospel and tell them that violence wasn't the answer. You just called him the face of evil. How do you go from devout Catholic to committing these crimes, wearing this mask that we see on our screen, and killing two people and attempting to kill two others?
Yeah, it's really kind of scary because it does appear that maybe just something snapped with this guy, because at least if you see that, it doesn't look like this would be the person that would be later killing people or have intent to murder people in his head. But certainly something may have happened that changed this guy, but it is just hard to tell. And maybe they'll find that out as they dig deeper into it, not only social media, but they're going to do extensive interviews with family, friends, neighbors, other people that know him. So they may get some more insight onto that, but it is very troubling to see that.
Yeah, and then one of the other major elements of this case, Jonathan, is that he didn't impersonate a police officer. And that's something that you can't undo, you can't unsee. Are you concerned about copycats when it comes to this, and how does law enforcement mitigate that?
Yeah, I would be concerned about copycat people doing this. Also, the other thing is it sort of erodes trust in law enforcement. Not that law enforcement didn't do a phenomenal job here, but now if people encounter law enforcement, particularly in that area, they may be hesitant to either cooperate with them and things like that. And you have so many instances now of, these swatting instances where people call 911 on unsuspecting homeowners and police come, and you do think there's more potential violence because of this. And I think the way you overcome it is just probably time, and people, again, build trust. And again, the police did everything great in this case, so hopefully it doesn't lead to more instances. But yeah, I would certainly be concerned of copycat cases. And just as a point, this is a unique case in a lot of respects, but impersonating police officers to commit crime, it has happened before. I actually prosecuted a murder case where people got into homes impersonating police to gain entry in the home and killed people within it. So it's not unheard of, but it's certainly a very troubling situation.
A 2-day manhunt, and now the suspect is behind bars, facing 40 years for each count. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us.
All right, well, let's head in. This is in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The U.S. attorney. Let's listen in.
But the details of Belter's crime are even worse. They are truly chilling. It is no exaggeration to say that his crimes are the stuff of nightmares. Belter stalked his victims like prey. He went to their homes, held them out as a police officer, and shot them in cold blood. Now, there's been a lot of information and misinformation out there about Belter's crimes. We have filed a detailed 20-page complaint and affidavit that sets forth what happened in this case. I'd like to share some of that information with you now. In the early morning hours of June 14th, Belter went to the homes of 4 Minnesota state politicians with the intent to kill them. Belter first traveled to the home of Minnesota State Senator John Hoffman in Champlin, Minnesota. Belter arrived at the senator's home disguised as a police officer. He arrived in a black SUV with emergency lights turned on and with a license plate that read police. Belter wore a black tactical vest and body armor. He carried a flashlight and a Beretta 9mm handgun. He also wore a hyper-realistic silicone mask. Senator Hoffman had a security camera. I've seen the footage from that camera, and it is chilling. Belter knocked on Senator Hoffman's front door and repeatedly shouted, "This is the police, open the door." Senator Hoffman and his wife, Yvette, came to the door. When they opened the door, Belter shined the flashlight in their faces and said there had been a shooting reported in the house. Belter asked if they had any weapons. When Belter lowered his flashlight, which he had shined in their face, they realized that he was not a police officer. They shouted out, "You're not a cop. You're not a police officer." Belter then announced, "This is a robbery," and forced himself into their home. When Senator Hoffman attempted to push Belter out and stop him from entering his home, Belter shot him repeatedly. Belter then shot Miss Hoffman repeatedly. Belter fled the scene, and the Hoffman's daughter called 911. Unfortunately, the Hoffmans survived, although they remain hospitalized. After shooting Senator Hoffman and his wife, Belter traveled to the home of another Minnesota state representative in Maple Grove, Minnesota. Video surveillance showed that Belter rang the doorbell at the state representative's house at approximately 2:24 a.m. on Friday night. Again, he was dressed as a law enforcement officer, wearing a tactical vest and body armor, carrying a handgun and a flashlight, and wearing that same hyper-realistic silicone mask. Again, the images, as you can see on the screen, are haunting. Now, fortunately, the state representative was not home. She and her family were gone on vacation, and so Belter left. Belter then traveled to the home of a Minnesota state senator who lived in New Hope, Minnesota. He parked in the street in that same black SUV with the police license plate. At about 2:36 a.m. on Friday night, after learning of the shooting of Senator Hoffman, New Hope police dispatched an officer to conduct a wellness check on the state senator who lived in New Hope. When the New Hope officer arrived at the scene, she saw Belter's black SUV parked down the block with the lights on. The New Hope police officer believed that Belter was a police officer who had been dispatched to the scene to check on the status of the state senator. The New Hope police officer pulled up next to Belter in his car, rolled down her window, and attempted to speak with him. Belter did not respond. According to the officer, he just sat there and stared straight ahead. So the New Hope police officer, who had been dispatched to the scene, proceeded to the state senator's home, and she waited for other law enforcement to arrive. When they did, by the time they did, Belter had left the scene. Belter then traveled to Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, and the home of Minnesota State Representative Melissa Hortman. At approximately 3:30 a.m., Belter arrived at Representative Hortman's house in his black SUV with the police license plates. He parked in the driveway and left the emergency lights on his SUV flashing, as if he was a police officer. Belter approached Representative Hortman's home, again dressed as a police officer, wearing the tactical vest and body armor, and wearing that hyper-realistic mask. He was armed and carrying a flashlight. Before he entered the home, 2 Brooklyn Park police officers arrived at the scene. They too had been dispatched to check on Representative Hortman after learning of the shooting of Senator Hoffman. When they arrived at the scene, they saw Belter's black SUV parked in the driveway with the emergency lights flashing, and they saw Belter standing in front of the house several feet from the door. When Belter saw the officers get out of the car, he drew his weapon and began firing. He rushed into the house through the front door, firing into it. He repeatedly fired into the house, and when he entered, he murdered Representative Hortman and her husband, Mark. The Brooklyn Park police officers fired at Belter as he rushed into the home, but he escaped into the home and out the back. Officers recovered Belter's 9mm Beretta, along with the body armor and the mask, behind the home along his path of flight when he fled on foot. They later searched Belter's car, where they found 5 more firearms, including assault-style rifles and a large quantity of ammunition. Belter also had in his car notebooks containing a list of more than 45 Minnesota state and federal elected officials, including Representative Hortman. Now, Belter planned his attack carefully. He researched his victims and their families. He used the internet and other tools to find their addresses and names, the names of their family members. He conducted surveillance of their homes and took notes about the location of their homes. He also prepared in other ways. He concealed himself as a police officer, outfitting his black SUV with police lights and a police license plate, wearing a black tactical vest and body armor, carrying a police flashlight and a handgun. And of course, he wore that hyper-realistic silicone mask as seen on the surveillance videos. The video of his arrival and shooting of Senator Hoffman is truly chilling. Again, it's no exaggeration to say this is the stuff of nightmares. There's a photo of the firearms found in Belter's abandoned SUV. Based on these crimes, we brought a federal complaint charging Belter with an array of federal charges. Counts 1 and 2 charge him with stalking. Count 1 charges him with stalking Representative Melissa Hortman using interstate facilities. And that's Title 18, United States Code 2261. The statutory penalties there are life in prison. Count 2, similarly, charges him with stalking State Senator John Hoffman using interstate facilities. The maximum penalty of that count is 20 years in prison. Counts 3 and 4 charge Belter with the murder of Melissa and of the Hortmans using a firearm in violation of 18 U.S.C. 924J. And these are punishable by a term of life imprisonment or even death. And counts 5 and 6 charge him with shooting the Hortmans and the Hoffmans using a firearm, and both of those counts also carry a maximum sentence of life in prison. Now, before I finish my remarks, I want to say a little bit about law enforcement and the manhunt that we've heard about the last 2 days. Over the past 48 hours, federal, state, and local law enforcement from throughout the state of Minnesota have worked together to carry out the largest manhunt in Minnesota history. Now, a lot has been said about law enforcement in recent weeks, but make no mistake, the men and women of our federal, state, and local law enforcement put their lives at risk and on the line to keep Minnesota safe. They work tirelessly, day and night, to make sure that the tragic events of Friday night ended without further violence or bloodshed.
Also, it is important to note that this guy who actually committed this crime, the Hoffmans, they actually survived. Okay, so most people think they're actually dead. No, the Hoffmans actually survived. John Hoffman and his wife, Yvette Hoffman, survived the recent shooting at their homes. Okay, so first of all, we got to say thank God for their lives. You know, if you think about how many times they were shot and they are still alive. So God is the greatest, for sure. God is the greatest.
All right, well, let's head in. This is in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The U.S. attorney. Let's listen in.
But the details of Belter's crime are even worse. They are truly chilling.
All right, Fetterman.
There's no exaggeration.
They're coming for Fetterman now, of course. You know, Fetterman has been outspoken about how he actually supports Trump. Here we go.
Longtime Democrat Randi Weingarten stepping down from her DNC post after criticizing Ken Martin's leadership. The teachers union president writing a letter to Martin saying, quote, "I appear to be out of step with the leadership you are forging, and I do not want to be the one who keeps questioning why we are not enlarging our tent and actively trying to engage more of our communities." Former Michigan gubernatorial candidate Tudor Dixon joins me now. And Tudor, for those that don't know, Ken Martin now runs the DNC. He had a little battle with his vice chair, David Hogg, and David Hogg's now out. Randi Weingarten's out. The latest example of the Democrat Party literally imploding at the seams, Tudor. Do they get it together before the midterms?
Oh, I mean, right. It's almost like we're watching a breakup every single day now. But I think the more important thing to talk about here is that the Democrat Party is not radical enough for these people. We said that for a long time, especially during 2020 when Randi Weingarten was keeping kids out of school. She had a huge influence over our children's education, and it was for the negative. And yet people were saying, no, she's just a moderate Democrat. She's not a moderate. David Hogg was not a moderate. David Hogg was ousted because he was trying to primary Democrats that he did not think were socialist enough. This party is breaking right now because it's not the moderate old Democrat Party. They are moving towards socialism. And when she says she wants to include other communities, they're not American communities. And that's the problem. The Democrats don't want, they see why some of them see why they lost in 2024. And Randi Weingarten doesn't want to hear about it. David Hogg doesn't want to hear about it. And we may just see the party completely break apart.
Okay, so you're an expert in politics. Which one of these sides wins out in the end? The new blood, the David Hoggs of the world, really trying to force this party even further to the left, or what I'm going to call the old guard. And I don't really know what their position is, to be quite frank with you. All I know is that old guard that's being led by Ken Martin wants to retain power at all costs. So which side wins out?
Well, I think we're going to be watching very closely what happens in your city of New York this next couple of weeks as we watch this primary play out. And we see that the candidate who has openly said, I am a socialist and I want to bring socialist policies to one of the most powerful cities in the world. And he's gaining traction. This is happening right now in the Democrat Party. And I believe that if we see that go that direction, if we see him win that primary, then the Democrat Party is very close to being completely lost.
I think that's a really good indicator. I think you're right to point that out. Somebody who seems to be absolutely on the outs with his own party, Senator John Fetterman, facing backlash yet again from the Democrats for supporting Trump's military parade on Saturday, posting the following on X. This parade is comprised of our sons, daughters, mothers, and fathers, the very best of us. Regardless of your politics, it's appropriate to celebrate the 250 years of sacrifice, dedication, and service. But that wasn't good enough for the left. A Philadelphia progressive group leader calling out Fetterman at a No Kings protest over the weekend, saying the following: we are looking to the leaders who will fight for us, because even today there are folks among the Democrat Party who think we should roll over and play dead. Anyone seen John Fetterman here? Look, this parade was patriotism, not politics. Why can't the progressive left acknowledge and honor the parade, honor our sacrifices of our brave men and women in the military who ultimately fought for that right to do what they did over this weekend, which is those No Kings protests? It doesn't make sense to her.
No, it doesn't make sense. I mean, this is really an extension of the conversation that we're already having. I was watching the parade over the weekend, and I think one of the most powerful moments, honestly, was when Joey Jones was on your program talking about this, and he said, look, we fought this war for 20 years. We came home, it ended badly. No one talked about it. There was no celebration. Morale was at an all-time low when Donald Trump took office. And now, today, we spend the day celebrating the people that went out there and fight and lost limbs, like Joey Jones. He was showing how much it meant to him and talking about how much it meant to everybody else. Why in the world would that be something the Democrats would attack? And this, again, goes to the fact that their party is just separating from American values, celebrating the people that keep you safe. It makes me laugh because this is also the party that wants to have an award ceremony for everything, and they want to make a big deal and dress up, and they want to be on TV. But to celebrate the men and women that allow them to do that every day, that allow them to dress in any way they want and go out and get whatever award they want, they won't take the time to celebrate them. That makes me sick.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of time before we start introducing him as independent John Fetterman, but we'll see.
Yeah, I believe he's going to be independent very soon because his ideologies has changed. All right, Pete Hegseth.
The parade wasn't just to show off our toys. It was also a warning shot.
If you threaten the American people, our soldiers are coming for you. Your defeat will be certain, your demise will be final, and your downfall will be total and complete. Because our soldiers never give up, never surrender, and never, ever quit. They fight, 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 and they win, win, win.
The media had been framing the parade as Nazi Germany on the Potomac. Instead, it was a patriotic love fest, and they didn't know how to feel about it.
Love fest.
You and I have both been at Trump rallies. Those can be
Very tense, a kind of, I would say, like kind of a dark, malevolent energy sometimes in them. Not always, but it doesn't seem like that's the energy on the mall today, which I think is a good sign, right?
You're really correct about that, Chris, and it's something we were watching for.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of surprised by the number of people who were at the front of the parade watching, cheering, and then would come and ask to take a selfie.
Yeah, right.
This is a very different mood here.
Yeah.
People seem to be going out of their way to say that they're here to celebrate the Army's 250th birthday. It's not dark.
They are.
It's not tense. It's not amped up. It's different.
Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth joins me now. All right, so Mr. Secretary, what was it like to observe the military parade with the president?
I mean, Jesse, it's exactly what we knew it would be. A beautiful celebration of the country and a recognition of 250 years of the United States Army. You don't get 1776 without 1775, the year the Army was created to defend the nation. And that's what we're still doing right now. And so it was an immense moment of pride for the president, for the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of the Army, everyone attending, all Americans who got to watch it on TV and who were motivated, who were proud, who were honored, who recognize that the things that we celebrate are a reflection of the things that we value. We value our troops. We value service. We value patriotism. We value the flag. And so that demonstration showed how strong we are, and that strength underwrites the freedom that we love. And so from everybody who watched it, saw it for what it was, which was a celebration, a beautiful celebration of the United States Army and the United States, and we should do more like it. I mean, it was a parade that got me motivated, or a series of parades that got me motivated to join the military many years ago when I was a kid. Those things matter, and that you've seen recruitment soar for our military because of President Trump. Events like that are going to remind Americans how special service is. So it was awesome. And the president was dead on right to do it.
So the president never turned to you and said, Mr. Secretary, please turn the tanks on the No King protest. Because that's what the media said he was going to do.
Of course, because they make an entire living. Their entire profession is predicated on intentionally misrepresenting the intentions of President Trump. I mean, this is a guy who wants peace through strength. This is a guy who wants a strong military so we can deter conflict. He thinks that, maybe we should send the National Guard to Los Angeles so that we can defend federal agents who are under attack. Yet he gets mischaracterized. So it's all a lie. It's all a misrepresentation. President Trump loves all Americans, wants American citizens to be kept safe, wants to defend our border, all the things they mischaracterize. Of course, the parade's another one of them. We get to watch President Trump every day. We know where his core is. We know that he loves the American people, wants a parade to celebrate our Army, and the rest of them can just be haters. That's all they are.
So you're going to be in the Situation Room pretty soon with the president. Is he still aiming for a nuclear deal with the Iranians?
Of course. The president's, as he said today, his position has not changed. What you're watching in real time is peace through strength and America first. Our job is to be strong. We are postured defensively in the region to be strong in pursuit of a peace deal. And we certainly hope that's what happens here. And America first means we're going to defend American personnel and American interests. So when you see jets and you see air defense assets and counter UAS assets, that's because my job as the Secretary of Defense is to ensure that our people are safe and that we're strong so that we can set the conditions for a deal. And President Trump's made it clear it's on the table. The question is whether Iran will take it.
All right. So the deal is still on the table, but all options are on the table from what it sounds like. What does that look like?
What it looks like right now is we're vigilant. We're prepared. And we've messaged consistently from the beginning that we're in the region to defend our people and our assets. And Israel took an action out of self-defense. We believe that Iran, as President has said from the beginning, should not have a nuclear weapon. That position hasn't changed. They can give it up peacefully. That position hasn't changed. And as a result, right now, we've got assets in the region and we're going to defend them. And we're going to be strong in the process. So people are reading into a lot of aspects right now. We're strong. We're prepared. We're defensive. And President Trump hopes there can be peace.
All right. Secretary Hegseth, thank you.
Also, I see people in the chat saying Disney owns Fox. Nope, Disney doesn't own Fox Corporation. Do your research. It's public information. Okay, don't come up here and be spreading fake news. All right, go do your research and come back to the chat. All right, here we go. Jesse.
Fox News alert, Donald Trump leaving the G7 early and returning to Washington, where he's requesting the National Security Council be prepared in the Situation Room after a deadly weekend in the Middle East. In Israel, 24 fatalities, 600 wounded. The death count even higher in Iran, 224 dead and counting. Iran retaliating by firing over 370 missiles at the Jewish state, but Israel's hitting back harder. Overnight, Iranian missiles struck an Israeli oil refinery and a power grid. This morning, a state TV outlet in Tehran was bombed during a live broadcast.
آنچه که ملاحظه کردید، صدایی که شنیدید، فضای غبارآلود استادیوم.
Tel Aviv is claiming full aerial superiority over Iranian airspace. They downed 2 Iranian fighter jets today after top Iranian military officials were taken out Friday. Israel says they've already destroyed a third of Iran's missile launchers, and nuclear sites are getting pummeled so badly that residents are being warned of radiation spillage. The IDF is warning that Iran will pay the price, and they've scheduled this campaign to last 2 weeks. Their plan is to degrade the Iranian nuclear program and destroy their ballistic missile stockpiles. The mullahs are getting battered, and they don't have the military capacity to trade endless missile strikes with Israel. They need a breather and are crossing their fingers that we don't provide the bunker busters that could eliminate their nuke sites deep underground. So they're begging Trump to come back to the negotiation table, hoping that the U.S. doesn't get involved militarily and that Netanyahu will take his finger off the trigger. Trump signaling that he'd prefer a deal over death.
Have you heard any signals or seen any messages from intermediaries that Iran wishes to de-escalate the conflict?
Yeah,
What have you heard? What have you heard from the Iranians?
they'd like to talk, but they should have done that before. I had 60 days, and they had 60 days, and on the 61st day, I said, we don't have a deal. They have to make a deal, and it's painful for both parties, but I'd say Iran is not winning this war, and they should talk, and they should talk immediately before it's too late.
Democrats call Trump the taco president, a.k.a. Trump always chickens out. But he gave the Iranians a deadline for a deal, and they missed the deadline. So he let Netanyahu go at him. Now Iran's begging for mercy. And they're not going to get a good of a deal now. The whole world witnessed that. That sends a strong message everywhere, even on trade. Now Iran's lost leverage. They're at their weakest point in decades. Israel's neutralized their proxies, Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Assad in Syria. The Iranians don't have much of a navy. Their air force is ancient, and their army's sitting ducks if they cross the border on foot into Iraq. They can't project power. The only thing keeping the Ayatollah alive is his nuclear program, and he's clinging on to it so that he doesn't get Gaddafi'd. You remember Gaddafi gave up his nuclear program, and then Barack, Hillary, and the Europeans killed him anyway. Trump says it's very simple.
I want to see no nuclear weapon in Iran, and we're well on our way to making sure that happens.
America can't let Iran acquire a nuclear weapon, or any other country. Americans can't get blackmailed by rogue states. And stopping the spread of nuclear weapons has been American policy since Oppenheimer made one. Trump originally put Netanyahu on ice and told him not to strike. But NBC reports Trump had a change of heart after the International Atomic Energy Agency said Iran was cheating. 47 didn't want to be the president on whose watch it was able to obtain a nuclear weapon. So the Pentagon started to quietly move resources to the region, deploying reconnaissance aircraft to conduct surveillance and provide intelligence to Israel. Moved anti-drone and anti-missile systems from Ukraine to the Middle East. A carrier strike group from the Pacific to the Eastern Mediterranean, and they're assisting Israel with refueling flights. We're helping Israel intercept Iranian strikes and defending American soldiers and assets in the region.
So you were closely coordinating with the U.S. throughout this process?
Look, we're fully coordinated, but understand that America, under President Trump, will make the decisions that are best for America. And that's the way it is. He understands that I, as the Prime Minister of Israel, the one and only Jewish state, must make the decisions that are important for the survival of my country, and he will do what is best for America. That is a relationship of mutual respect and mutual confidence.
Israel has its own agenda. They're looking out for their own interests. And sometimes those interests align with ours, and sometimes they don't. Israel isn't interested in talks with Iran. Netanyahu called the nuclear negotiations between Tehran and Washington fake. Trump disagrees. He'd rather negotiate a settlement than settle it with airstrikes. Israel wants regime change. Reports say Trump told Netanyahu no when they asked to assassinate Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei. Officials say, have the Iranians killed an American yet? No. Until they do, we're not even talking about going after the political leadership. Bibi says Iran tried to kill Trump.
These people who chant death to America, try to assassinate President Trump twice. Do you want these people to have nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them to your cities? Of course not. Yeah. So we're defending ourselves, but we're also defending the world.
You just said Iran tried to assassinate President Trump twice. Do you have intel that the assassination attempts on President Trump were directly from Iran?
Through proxies, yes. Through their intel, yes. They want to kill him.
Whoa. Well, we know Iran tried to kill Trump, but we never knew Ruth and Crooks were Iranian proxies. Either Netanyahu just shared intelligence that hasn't been shared with the American people, or he's spinning. Remember, there's always propaganda when missiles are flying. And as critical as it is to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon, we've seen the risks of regime change. What comes next is the question. Iran's a theocracy. You can take out the Ayatollah, but there's still 30,000 radical clerics. You can't kill them all. So who takes over after a decapitation strike? Someone even more dangerous? Does the country disintegrate into militia infighting? Do insurgents take over the oil sector? Do jihadists pour in from all over the world and force Iranian refugees to pour out? And then who takes them? Israel doesn't have to manage that chaos. That'll fall to the United States. We've overthrown Iranian leaders before. We installed the Shah, and he was a great ally against the Soviets and kept the oil flowing. But he was so unpopular, there was a revolution, and these fundamentalists took over. Their paramilitary groups laid siege to the region, and they started enriching uranium. It's who we're dealing with now. You never really know what happens after you topple a leader. You'd rather have ships sailing from Europe to the Indian Ocean without any trouble. So far, oil prices haven't spiked too much. Oil in the 60s, it's what's kept inflation at bay this year. Let's keep it that way. There's two key things to look for to tell you how this conflict's going to play out. If the Israelis start targeting Iranian oil refineries, that could tell you regime change could be next, because a domestic energy crisis will turn the streets against Iranian leadership. And also look for whether bunker busters will be used. Israel has them, but they don't go as deep as the American ones. And if the U.S. delivers them to Israel or uses them ourselves, that'll cripple the only card Iranians have left and could lead to the Iranians lashing out wildly in a last-ditch effort to preserve their power. Or it could force them to sign a settlement where they swear off enrichment. Or the settlement opens up their country for inspections so invasive that it makes it almost impossible for the regime to retain legitimacy and hurts their ability to control their own population, which is their main goal. At that point, you could have a revolution, or anything could happen. This is a fast-moving story. Trump just posted on Truth Social, everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. This country elected President Trump because they trust him as commander-in-chief more than they trusted Joe Biden, and much more than they would have trusted Kamala Harris. One of the reasons he won the Republican primary in 2016 was because he called the Iraq war dumb. But Trump has also shown his willingness to take strong and decisive action to eliminate foreign threats. So far, the risks to American soldiers have been minimal, and we hope it stays that way. Because if we can achieve a peaceful solution to the Iranian issue, the rest of the president's Mideast agenda falls into place. The Abraham Accords, low energy prices, free shipping lanes, and an AI market that relies on U.S. tech. We can then finally pivot to Asia and back here to the homeland to confront more immediate challenges. Click here.
Wow. C. Shelley just opened up in the chat. I've never heard him say that before. C. Shelley says, my son in the United States Air Force, Mideast, for many years. Whoa. First of all, I gotta say thank you for allowing your son serve this beautiful nation. God bless him and God bless you. Thank you and thank him for his service. All right, here we go. Liberals, before you start crying, here goes CNN.
President Trump is in Canada for the G7 summit with huge implications on things like trade deals, but also a brewing war. This could be extremely fraught, with some U.S. allies wondering if Donald Trump is with them or against them. All the while, the G7 nations grappling with the threat of the potential of an all-out war in the Middle East. CNN's chief data analyst, Harry Enton, with me right now. All right, with so many things that are sort of heavily weighing over this summit, what are you learning about what the people of these countries think about Donald Trump and whether he is with or against them?
Yeah, I think that this title slide says it all, why Trump faces a tough room at the G7. That is because the countries outside the U.S. who are part of the G7, those folks, not big fans of Donald Trump. Not big fans at all. No confidence Trump will do the right thing when it comes to world affairs. Look at this. All these numbers are at least at 60% or above. You could start off here at the bottom, Japan 61, the UK 62. You go to that next row, Italy 68. We're getting higher and higher and higher. Canada 77. And finally, France 78%. And Germany, 81% of Germans have no confidence that Donald Trump will do the right thing when it comes to world affairs. We're looking at a supermajority in all 6 of these G7 countries besides the U.S. They do not like Donald Trump. They have no confidence in him to do the right thing when it comes to world affairs. And I think that will inform some of the leaders there in those countries going into this G7 summit with Donald Trump. And again, he's just going to face a tough room because those folks in those countries, they don't really like Donald Trump.
How much has this changed since Trump was elected?
Yeah, this is, I think, you see all these numbers here and you go, okay, has this always been the case that there's been such low confidence in the U.S. leader? Take a look here. Okay, no confidence that the U.S. president will do the right thing when it comes to world affairs. We're going to look at a median of those 6 countries that we just saw on the other side. You see it here. In 2025, 73%.
I want y'all to keep in mind that these were the same folks I told you Kamala Harris was leading in the polls. Don't forget, these were the same folks. We have every indication the polls is leading and telling us that Kamala Harris is on track to winning the election. Here we go.
The median in those countries have no confidence that Donald Trump will do the right thing when it comes to world affairs. With Joe Biden, look how much lower that number was. It was basically 50-50 at 51%. So the percentage of those G7 countries that have no confidence that Donald Trump will do the right thing has gone completely through the roof. We're talking about a 22-point jump in just a year's time. Rough room, tough room for Donald Trump.
A tough room, even with one of our closest allies, both by land and by culture, Canada. Do they want even a deal with Trump?
Yeah, this to me is the number that kind of says it all, right? We're talking about allies of the United States here. No ally has been closer to us over the years than Canada has been, but Canadians are reducing reliance on the U.S. as a trade partner. Look at this. 91% say that, yes, that they, in fact, the Canadians should, in fact, reduce reliance on the U.S. as a trade partner. You never see numbers that high. I'm laughing because it's just unprecedented compared to just 9% who disagree. 9%, that's about the percentage of Americans who believe we faked the moon landing. When you're in this territory, you know that we're in a lot of trouble. Donald Trump's in a lot of trouble when it comes to Canadians' views on him.
That is an unprecedented number in any poll.
Why should he care about Canadians?
Right. Harry Enden, thank you so much.
Thank you.
President Trump is in Calgary for the G7 summit. In just a few hours, he will have his first meeting of the day with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney before the official G7 welcome event that happens at noon. This is the first international summit of Trump's second term, one with major implications on the domestic front for the president's trade deals and internationally, of course, with that growing conflict between Israel and Iran. CNN senior White House correspondent Kristen Holmes is in Calgary for what will be a busy day. Kristen.
Yeah, John, it's not as though there isn't anything going on in the world, but when you talk to President Trump and his advisors, the real focus for them is the global economy. It is these trade deals and potentially coming back with trade deals. I mean, we have to remember that the backdrop of all of this is, one, a looming global trade war, but also, two, those reciprocal tariffs that he has promised to put in place. That deadline is coming up and coming up fast. It's July 9th. And we expect Donald Trump to possibly even get aggressive with this, which we've seen in the past. Now, he talked about these trade deals specifically when he was leaving for this trip. Here's what he said.
We have our trade deals. All we have to do is send a letter. This is what you're going to have to pay. But I think we'll have a few new trade deals.
Few deals there. You said sending the letters. That's something he's talked about, sending letters to these various allies, trading partners, to say what their unilateral tariffs will be if they don't meet that deadline. We know the European Union, Japan are all looking to make those deals. But when we take trade out of the picture, we just talk about these global alliances and these global relationships. The thing to look at here, you're going to see a lot of these leaders trying to really suss out where Donald Trump stands on various issues. These are some of our closest allies, but as we've seen, Donald Trump doesn't really care about our historically closest allies. And one of the things that these other countries' leaders want to come away with is not having a confrontation, particularly a public confrontation with President Trump. You know, we'll see him sit down with Prime Minister Carney later this morning. The last meeting the two of them had didn't go great. It was on camera, and you saw the Prime Minister, who seemed very prepared for this sit down with Donald Trump, growing increasingly tense while Donald Trump kind of belittled Canada. At one point, he kept talking about how he wanted to be the 51st state, was talking about trade, laying into him publicly in front of these cameras. And these other leaders, they don't want to have a confrontation like this. They're going to have to, behind the scenes, try to work with Donald Trump, who obviously is a mercurial person and isn't afraid to have these kind of confrontations in public, to see where he stands and if he is on the same side as they are with some of these international issues.
All right, just one of the things, or one of the many things he'll be discussing today. Kristen Holmes in Calgary, thank you so much. Great to see you. Sarah.
Joining me now, Democratic Congressman Adam Smith of Washington State. I want to first just quickly talk to you about the G7. There is concern among G7 leaders that whether or not Donald Trump and the U.S. is with or against them, they are the allies of the United States. How concerned are you about the feeling of the G7 nations?
I'm very concerned. First of all, it's a legitimate concern based on what Donald Trump has done as president in the last 5 months. You know, he's basically started a trade war with the entire world. I mean, we have a major challenge with China. I mean, taking that on its own would be difficult. But now President Trump has alienated all of the potential partners in that challenge. He's made it clear that he will place tariffs on anybody and everybody, regardless of the relationship. And then, as John was just alluding to, the constant belittling of our allies like Canada and Denmark, the threatening to use military force to take Greenland and take Panama and to annex Canada. I think all of the G7 have every reason to worry whether or not Donald Trump is truly going to work with them and be a partner and an ally.
I want to talk about that G7 summit in Canada, where President Trump is going to gather with the leaders of the world's wealthiest nations to discuss a wide range of global issues. High up on the agenda, the Israel-Iran conflict and more potential trade deals the Trump administration hopes to secure.
All we have to do is send a letter. This is what you're going to have to pay. But I think we'll have a few new trade deals, yeah.
Group chat is back. Just reminding people that the Trump administration had set like a 90-day goal to make a bunch of trade deals by, I think this was land in early July. Haven't been a long list that have been announced of confirmed deals. But this is also, the G7 is where, I think last time around when Trump was there, you have that very famous photo of Angela Merkel and everyone standing around him. Very different vibe this time, I assume.
Yeah, but if they can get out of this summit without a major diplomatic conflagration, I think it'll be a success.
You're setting a bar low for a diplomatic event.
Right.
Okay.
I really like that word.
Yeah. Conflagration. Yeah. You mean tweeting from the plane, which is, I think, what happened last time.
Showdowns,
yeah.
People walking out, we'll see. But I don't expect much out of this summit just because the president doesn't really agree on very much with the other leaders that are there. We've seen a complete disconnect. So maybe some progress on trade deals, but I think there's still a question of what exactly the president wants in a lot of these separate deals. What he really wants is tariffs.
As Caitlin Collins, who's in Canada with the president, got word that he's cutting his trip short there from the G7 and returning to Washington tonight, further amplifying the notion that the U.S. may be getting involved in the fight. We don't know for sure yet. In addition to all of that, there was this today from Israel's prime minister saying he would not rule out a strike on Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei.
So are you going to target the supreme leader?
Look, we're doing what we need to do. I'm not going to get into the details, but we've targeted their top nuclear scientists. It's basically Hitler's nuclear team.
But U.S. officials tell us that the president flatly rejected a plan, an opportunity that the Israelis had to take out the supreme leader. Do you understand his concern? My understanding is his concern is that this would escalate the conflict beyond where it is already.
It's not going to escalate the conflict. It's going to end the conflict.
That conflict so far has taken at least 24 lives in Israel, 224 in Iran, according to authorities in each country. But it's that evacuation warning from the president tonight and what it could mean, which starts us off. CNN Chief White House correspondent Caitlin Collins is in Canada, has some new reporting on it. She joins us from Calgary, Alberta. What is the White House saying about President Trump's declaration that everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran, and then the word that he's coming back to the White House?
Yeah, Anderson, it's hard to see how those are not tied together because the White House specifically cited what is happening in the Middle East for why President Trump is cutting his trip here in Canada short. I flew with President Trump on Air Force One yesterday. He arrived late last night in Calgary to head to this summit with world leaders. He had an entire day of meetings scheduled for tomorrow, including a meeting, I should note, with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky as well, and on that list of everything that these leaders were going to talk about. But the White House has decided to cut this trip short so the president can return to Washington tonight, citing exactly what is happening inside the Middle East. We've talked to officials about the president's post on Truth Social earlier that everyone who lives in Tehran should evacuate. Obviously, that is millions of people, Anderson, and a quite urgent warning from the president of the United States. One official said it just reflected the reality of the situation of trying to get Iran to the table as they are trying to sort this out, with the president still voicing confidence that some kind of deal with Iran could be made after obviously those talks kind of fell apart or entirely fell apart after Israel first struck Iran late last week. And so, Anderson, we're still talking to people and trying to figure out what this means and why there is this newfound sense of urgency to the president returning to Washington to go and meet with his team. We did see several of his national security members who were there in Washington earlier. That includes the vice president, the Joint Chiefs chairman, who were meeting at the White House, in addition to announcements from the defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, about some aircraft carrier movement as they're basically posturing to make sure they're protecting the U.S. forces who are in the region right now. I will note one person who's here on the trip with President Trump is the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. I'm told he's been briefing him throughout the day on the latest and the updates that we've been seeing. And the president has also had several conversations with the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. And so everyone is watching, obviously, what is happening in the Middle East and also why the president's cutting his trip short, his trip here early short is making such a difference and what that means about what's next.
Yeah. Caitlin, we'll see you at the top of the hour on The Source. Coming up next right now, CNN Chief International Correspondent Clarissa Ward in Israel. She's at Tel Aviv's largest hospital. Clarissa, how Are Israel's defenses, first of all, holding up against the latest Iranian retaliation?
Well, there had been the expectation that tonight was going to see some heavy activity because we had heard from Iranian state media that there were waves and waves of drones and missiles heading this way. Earlier, the alert did go off. The sirens went off very shortly afterwards. Everyone here at this hospital where we are gathered in a secured shelter area inside. But those missiles did not really seem to materialize. There were reports of potentially a couple of intercepts, but no impacts that we have heard of so far. And it has actually been pretty quiet up until this point. I will say, though, just based on the patterns that we've been observing over the last couple of nights, that the majority of the heavy strikes seem to happen around 4:30 in the morning. That's still a couple of hours away. But obviously right now a huge question mark over what is happening in Tehran, what may be happening shortly in Tehran based on President Trump's somewhat ominous post. We are hearing reports of thousands and thousands of people in that city of 10 million taking to the streets and trying to go in their cars and get out of the city. Reports of heavy traffic jams clogging up the streets, but very little clarity as to what exactly is going on, and all of that also being fueled, as you mentioned earlier in the show, by these comments from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, where he really would not rule out the possibility that regime change is, if not the stated objective, certainly the desired outcome of these attacks against Iran, Anderson.
That is the thing, the situation that Israel finds itself in. And if there is not regime change, the knowledge of how to manufacture a nuclear device or the nuclear material that they're working with, that remains. And unless the U.S. is involved, it's a real question whether or not they can actually take out both of these Iranian nuclear facilities.
And it's interesting, Anderson, you know, when you talk to people here about the possibility of, okay, look, it looks like Iran has made some signals that maybe they're ready to talk, that maybe they're ready to go back to the negotiating table. The attitude here is that there's no interest in that. There's no time for talking now. The objectives of this operation have to be achieved, but there's still a lot of ambiguity as to what exactly those objectives are. Is the objective simply to dismantle or at least delay Iran's nuclear process? Again, earlier on, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu seemed to indicate that significant progress has already been made in that endeavor. But if the objective is to completely dismantle it, to ensure that it can never be resurrected, that seems to indicate that regime change is really the desired outcome here. Not clear how that would transpire or what that would look like, but certainly that is raising a lot of anxiety, Anderson, across this entire region.
Yeah, Clarissa Ward, thanks very much. We're going to check back in with you later on in this hour. I want to get perspective now from CNN Global Affairs analyst Brett McGurk, former Middle East and North Africa coordinator for the National Security Council, also retired U.S. Army Colonel Pete Mansour, senior fellow at the Mershon Center for International Security Studies at Ohio State University. Colonel, first of all, what's your read on the president's social media post calling for the evacuation of Tehran? Do you think that is an indication that the United States is going to get directly involved in this?
It certainly seems that way. You know, I didn't really think the United States would get involved unless it was attacked in the region by Iran. But with the president returning a day early from the G7, there's really no reason for him to do that if he's just monitoring the situation. He can do that up in Calgary. So I think this may be tipping the hand that the United States might weigh in a military sense to complete the job that the Israelis have started.
Brett, do you agree with that this seems to be an indication of something?
I think there's two things going on here, Anderson, and both are linked. I think we are moving our military assets into place to be able to do a strike into Iran, particularly to take out that Fordo facility deeply underground, something really only the U.S. can do. But secondly, there's still an off-ramp on diplomacy. This is coercive diplomacy, what you're seeing. Basically, the White House believes they put a deal down to the Iranians about 6 weeks ago that it's a good, fair deal. The Iranians really never responded to that. In fact, they escalated their program in response to that. And basically, I think the view is if Abbas Araghchi the foreign minister of Iran calls Steve Witkoff, who is President Trump's envoy, and says, you know what, I re-looked at the deal you put down, I'm ready to take it, that's the off-ramp. If Iran does not do that, I think it seems like the U.S. is putting everything in place to get directly involved militarily. One way or the other, it's very clear here. I think Iran cannot be left at the end of this with that enrichment program in place at Fordo. Natanz is the other one. The Israelis have hit that. And then you have the conversion facility. This is part of the fuel cycle at Esfahan, which has also been hit. But Fordo, that is the key. And if you don't dismantle Fordo at the end of this, as you said, Anderson, not only does Iran have the know-how, they have an underground facility with about 10 cascades of very advanced centrifuges, and then you're kind of in an even worse position. So this is really coming to a head fast. It's unprecedented. If anybody says they know where this is going, they don't know what they're talking about. But I see putting the military pieces in place, that's smart, as you have a diplomatic off-ramp. So, let's hope Iran decides to take that off-ramp. Otherwise, I think we're possibly looking to an American strike at Fordo.
Colonel, do you have a sense of how long it takes to get U.S. assets in place? I mean, we're talking about, battleships and other assets.
Well, we're really talking B-2 bombers and other aircraft like the B-1 that can carry the kind of weapons that could penetrate the mountain at Fordow and destroy it. Some of those systems are already in place. They're at Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. They're at Gutter, and they can fly from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, for that matter. So we have the capability now to strike Fordow. It's just a matter of giving the word.
Now you're complaining that we're showing CNN.
Moments ago, and I quote him, everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. As Iran is warning that a ninth wave of attacks against Israel is now underway and will continue until dawn. This is now the fifth night of attacks between the two countries. And just moments ago, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth posting on social media, and I quote, he said, I directed the deployment of additional capabilities to the Middle East region. So what does that mean? Now we know that the U.S. Navy Nimitz carrier strike group is already heading towards the Middle East right now, and more U.S. naval assets capable of defending against ballistic missiles are expected to be moving into the eastern Mediterranean, closer to Israel in these next coming days. The latest Iranian attacks coming after the IDF released these new images of Israel destroying what it says are 2 Iranian fighter jets. And earlier today, an unbelievable moment unfolded live on Iranian state television. Let me show it to you.
فضای غبارآلوده استادیوم
I mean, it's stunning to even watch that. Israel hit the headquarters of Iran state media. Now, the IDF said that this wasn't a mistake. They said it was a precise strike based on intelligence that the building was being used for military purposes. Now, an Iranian source sent me these letters that Iran sent to the Secretary General of the UN and the UN Security Council earlier today, in which Iran demands immediate action following what it calls Israel's, quote, deliberate attacks on Iran's nuclear facilities. And the letter goes on to demand that the UN, quote, hold Israel and its accomplices fully accountable. Now, the accomplices, the use of that word is a very thinly veiled reference to the United States. But while the U.S., of course, backs Israel at this point, clearly the two countries are not entirely on the same page, as sources tell CNN, that President Trump opposed an Israeli plan to assassinate the supreme leader. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu refused to take that option off the table today.
It's not going to escalate the conflict. It's going to end the conflict.
Lauren Lieberman is out front in Tel Aviv to begin our coverage. And Oren, what is the latest that you're learning? As we understand, Iran is saying that missiles will be coming to where you are from now all the way till dawn.
Well, we at least got some sense of that. Just a short while ago, we had to run to the bomb shelter downstairs in the hotel about 1 hour ago, where we spent 20 minutes there because of warnings of more incoming, including here to Tel Aviv in the heart of Israel. At least according to Israel's emergency responders so far, like Magen David Adom, there were no impacts, so either those missiles were intercepted or weren't able to strike the targets and hit in either military or residential areas. That being said, it's 2 in the morning here, so there are at least 4 or 5 hours until dawn, and we saw missiles incoming at about 4 in the morning last night, so there's very much the potential for more ballistic missiles and more drones as the night goes on here. Meanwhile, as you pointed out, Israel has continued its strikes in Iran and in Tehran. In addition to hitting Iran's state broadcaster, they took out 2 aircraft on the ground and have continued to go after other targets as well. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said so far Israel's strikes against Iran's nuclear facilities have set the nuclear program back many, many years. He wouldn't give a specific number on anything like that, how much they really have damaged the nuclear program. But Israel's former defense minister told CNN earlier today that it was some years that they had set the program back. Meanwhile, there are rising casualties on both sides, 24 killed so far in Israel. Meanwhile, a much higher death toll in Iran, 224 killed there. And it doesn't look like this is going away anytime soon. Iran has vowed it will not negotiate under attack. Meanwhile, Netanyahu spoke of what he called, quote, complete victory. That is a phrase we've heard in the war in Gaza, which is past 600 days now. And this fight, although it's incredibly early here, shows no sign of an off-ramp right now, no matter what President Donald Trump promises about perhaps finding a way to end this conflict, quote, soon.
All right. Oren, thank you very much. Live in Tel Aviv. We'll be checking back in with you this hour. Out front now, Ophir Akunis, the Consul General of Israel in New York. And Consul, I really appreciate your time. So,
thank you for
just start with, President Trump had said, okay, he's going to come back from the G7 and he's going to get this over with. But then he also said Tehran should be evacuated right now. Just to take that statement, that one statement, Tehran should be evacuated right now. Is he right?
I will tell you, 1 hour ago, they fired 10 ballistic missiles toward our civilians. Now they want a ceasefire after almost 50 years of saying that they want to destroy us. Now we, for your question, we will accomplish our 2 goals. Destroy their ballistic missiles and nuclear capability. And that's what we are going to do, even if it will take weeks.
Even if it will take weeks. Okay, so I just want to understand, as everyone wants to understand more on what this means. So ballistic missiles, nuclear program. Let's talk about the nuclear program.
Exactly.
We've got the latest satellite images of Fordow, which of course is one of the main nuclear sites and the one that is at least known to have substantial assets deep underground, which was done in order to prevent Israel from bombing it. It's buried deep in the mountains, 300 feet or more underground, as we understand it. Okay, we understand, analysts keep telling us, it is the U.S. that has the so-called bunker buster bombs that have the ability to destroy an asset of that sort, and only the U.S. But I ask you, can Israel destroy the Fordow site and that deep nuclear capability without U.S. help?
First of all, we will not take decisions for the American administration. We will do whatever we can, and we are doing it to prevent the Ayatollahs to hold a nuclear weapon. This is the most dangerous thing to the Western civilization, and I'm talking about this studio, this place, this city as well. So we are trying to do it. We are doing it very well. Until now, we want, first of all, to defend our people from their missiles and from the nuclear weapon plan. This is very dangerous to the world and to Israel as well, and we are doing whatever we can to prevent it.
All right, so I am just curious, though, when your prime minister says that the strikes so far have set back Iran's nuclear program a very, very long time, many, many years.
Exactly, quote.
Why is that not enough?
It's not enough because we suppose that they are trying to progress their plan, even though it's almost a week that we are there during this operation. We are not counting on them. We must be sure that we'll accomplish our 2 goals, and we are not sure yet about the nuclear sites. We want to be sure about. I suppose that there's more than 2, but you mentioned the 2 of them, and we want to be sure that we'll accomplish our goals, and then we can say, what we can do with the Ayatollahs. We're not talking about the Iranians. Erin, we
The
are
Ayatollahs, the
talking
leaders.
about the Ayatollahs. That's right. Exactly.
Consul, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Erin.
All right, and I want to go now to the former Defense Secretary and CIA Director Leon Panetta. And Director Panetta, you just heard the Consul General there from Israel saying that setting back many years, right? That is not what the goal is. The goal is more than that. They want to get rid of the capability of a nuclear weapon for.
All right, so the Commander-in-Chief, President Trump, just posted on Truth Social, 5:20 a.m. It says here, I have not reached out to Iran for peace talks in any way, shape, or form. This is just more highly fabricated fake news. If they want to talk, they know how to reach me. They should have taken the deal that was on the table. Would have saved a lot of lives. It's on, ladies and gentlemen, it's on.
Iran altogether. And also then he also made a distinction that it was beyond that it was also getting rid of the leadership of Iran, of the Ayatollahs. What do you hear when you hear that?
Well, I hear two goals that are going to be, frankly, difficult to achieve unless the United States goes to war with Israel, which is not likely. But the fact is that to go after their nuclear capability, you've got to be able to go after these deeply buried facilities at Fordo that can only be attacked with busting weapons that the United States has and be delivered by a B-2 bomber. So to totally be able to wipe out their nuclear capability is just not going to happen if it's left to Israel on their own. And with regards to regime change, I think the problem there is that it isn't that easy to achieve in Iran, that you can undermine their command structure, you can go after their nuclear scientists. But the fact is, even if you go after Khomeini, there are going to be other hardliners that will take their place. So I think Israel has to think about just exactly what it is that they're trying to achieve. If they're trying to weaken Iran, that's an achievable goal. Beyond that, I think it's going to be difficult.
So specifically regarding the Ayatollahs, and let's just talk about the supreme leader, right? The leading Ayatollah, Khamenei. And Prime Minister Netanyahu said killing him would not escalate the conflict. It said he would, quote, end the conflict. It sounds like you disagree with that assessment.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that getting rid of Khomeini is not going to suddenly result in regime change. That's the bottom line. You're talking about the Quds Force. You're talking about a lot of hardline commanders that are still very active in Iran. And the fact is, the more Israel bombs Iran, the more the Iranian people will be concerned about trying to protect their own Iran against Israel. So when you look at all of these other factors, the bottom line is that achieving regime change is not easy to do, cannot be done simply by killing Khomeini, and frankly cannot be done simply by the kind of missile attacks that are going on right now.
Man, hopefully peace can reign. How did we even get here?
I think we're doing
But we're
pretty
here.
well. We're talking. We have a thing called a telephone, so we're talking. But it's always better to talk in person. I want to see no nuclear weapon in Iran, and we're well on our way to making sure that happens.
We've had a discussion about. We're back with our world lead. That was President Trump with Prime Minister Keir Starmer just moments ago at the G7 summit in Canada, talking about what it will take to end the fighting between Iran and Israel. Now, earlier today, the president told reporters he believes Iran would, quote, like to talk about de-escalating its conflict with Israel, noting that Iran, in his words, quote, not winning this war. Israel started attacking Iran's nuclear facilities and top military leaders on Friday, local time Thursday evening here in the U.S. The attacks have since expanded to include Iranian oil and other military facilities. The Iranians have responded by firing waves of ballistic missiles and drones at Israel, hitting, among other targets, Haifa and Tel Aviv. Now, these are among the day's most dramatic images. Israel hit Iranian state TV during a live broadcast. The Israeli military says the building housing Iran state TV studios was being used by Iranian armed forces under the guise of civilian activity, adding it sent an advance warning advising civilians to get out of the way. In Israel itself, at least 24 people have been killed and nearly 600 injured since the fighting started last week. CNN's Jeremy Diamond is in Tel Aviv, where shaken residents are taking cover, hearing explosions, then emerging to check the damage.
This is what surviving an Iranian ballistic missile attack looks like. Amid wrecked cars and scattered debris, this central Tel Aviv neighborhood engulfed in flames as rescuers arrive on the scene. For the third night in a row, Iranian ballistic missiles struck the Tel Aviv area. We arrived minutes later as people emerged, shaken but alive, from their bomb shelters. This man arrived distraught to inspect the damage to his shop. We came here and everything was destroyed, he tells me. After an hour-long wait, a boyfriend's anxious wait turns into a loving embrace.
Yeah, you can feel it. It goes through you.
Even inside their shelters, people here felt the power of the blast.
Like smoke, like a really strong. I had to cover my nose with a t-shirt.
And were overwhelmed by the smoke-filled air as they emerged. The shockwave broke windows and damaged homes blocks away from the impact. But at the epicenter, where rescue crews continue to pour in and out of the scene, it is another level of destruction altogether.
This is the devastation caused by an Iranian ballistic missile that struck this Tel Aviv neighborhood in the early hours of this morning. And you can see all around me what that looks like. These buildings that have been torn to shreds, vehicles wrecked from the missile.
At least 5 Iranian missiles penetrated Israeli air defenses, according to Israeli rescue services, killing 10 people on Sunday night. In Iran, a widening Israeli bombardment campaign driving people to flee the capital city, as jets strike not only military and nuclear facilities, but also economic targets and residential neighborhoods. More than 200 people have been killed in the Israeli strikes, according to the Iranian Health Ministry, which says a majority of the victims are civilians. I'm scared, says this woman whose home was damaged in a strike. My heart is pounding. I felt like my heart stopped.
And Phil, with no diplomatic off-ramp in sight, this deadly tit-for-tat between Israel and Iran seems likely to continue. The Israeli Prime Minister tonight saying that he believes Israel has already significantly set back Iran's nuclear program, saying that Israel is, quote, sending them back a very, very long time. He refused to elaborate, but he also made clear that Israel still has many more targets to strike in Iran. Phil?
Our thanks to CNN's Jeremy Diamond for that report. Joining us now is former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett. Sir, appreciate your time. I believe you were heading to a bunker as we speak. Can you explain what's happening right now on the ground?
Yeah. What's happening is fairly standard. We get every night rockets being shot from Iran, and just now we got sirens. So I'm going with my family to the local shelter, like all Israelis do, and we're going to be safe.
Can you, the cost benefit clearly decided by Israeli leaders to take the initiative in starting these strikes. Are you surprised in any way by the scale or lack thereof in the Iranian response up to this point?
No, it's reasonable, and it's the decision is a correct decision because we're taking action now. That's painful. 30 Israelis were killed, but we're taking short-term pain in order to prevent long-term destruction. If we didn't act, it wouldn't be regular ballistic missiles that we're going to see in 2 minutes here. It would be ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads.
The Prime Minister has laid out his scope in terms of the desired outcome here, which is elimination of any possibility of a nuclear program, but also elimination of Iran's ballistic missile capability. That short-term pain,
that's right.
How long does that last?
As long as it's necessary. The Israeli people are strong. We understand that this is just something we have to go through in order to remove this existential threat. Look, we have no issue with Iran. If Iran would stop wanting to destroy Israel. You know, its leader says we're going to destroy Israel. They develop nuclear arms. They develop ballistic missiles. They stop all of this. We can have peace. We can have quiet. But unless they do that, we have to act. And this was more than the last moment. It's beyond the last moment. I mean, at this time, it's becoming fairly difficult to take out the entire nuclear program because they've already spread it across multiple locations.
That was actually what I want to ask you about. In terms of the goals set out by the Prime Minister, does the Israeli military have the capability to achieve those goals unilaterally?
We have meaningful capabilities. It's not going to be 100%, but think of it as a assembly line. And if you take out part of the assembly line, you've done a lot. But what we're doing right now is also peeling all their defenses of the regime itself because they're shooting all these missiles at us. So, even if it's not full removal of the nuclear program, it's the best we can do, and it's what we have to do.
I want to play something for you that President Trump said earlier today about Iran. Take a listen.
They'd like to talk, but they should have done that before. They have to make a deal, and it's painful for both parties, but I'd say Iran is not winning this war, and they should talk, and they should talk immediately before it's too late.
Do you believe that's an option at this point?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if there's a deal to be made right now in 2 minutes, if they agree to basically stop doing everything they can to destroy my country, my nation, this all goes away. What that means is dismantling the nuclear program, dismantling the ballistic missile factories, and stopping the terror. Just go carry on like any regular country, like Belgium or Italy, that don't go around trying to destroy other countries. So it's a very low threshold. That's all we're asking. We don't want to be destroyed. They want to destroy us. We cannot give in on this because we're not willing to go through a Holocaust again. Not this time.
There have been reports today about a potential plan to strike the Ayatollah directly. Is that something you think should happen?
It's a possibility. In order to achieve our three goals, there's many ways to do it. I wouldn't take it off the table, but there's a lot of other things that we're doing. We're, as I said, removing the defenses of Iran. So now we can hit the Iranian regime, the Iranian military, and the Iranian nuclear program. I want to make one point, though. The Iranian people are not our enemy. We respect the Iranian people. We know that they're under a horrible dictatorship. So this is not war between the Israeli people and the Iranian people. It's between Israel and this horrible regime.
Would you like to see President Trump commit to more active participation of U.S. forces?
Look, America's doing a lot already, helping us defend ourselves, giving us various capabilities. It's not ours to tell President Trump what to do. President Trump looks after America's national interest, not Israel's national interest. I will say, though, that you couldn't get a better deal than have Israel do this really tough job, this thankless job of removing this threat. You see, if there was an Israel around taking care of North Korea 30 years ago, you wouldn't have a nuclear North Korea. This time we're acting. So it's a pretty good deal for America. We're not asking for boots on the ground. We're paying the price. We're getting killed, but we'll do everything necessary. Our pilots are right now over Iran attacking those facilities. At the end of the day, it's President Trump's decision.
Former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, appreciate your time. Please stay safe, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the live show. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, it's easy. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the channel. It's free. If you haven't double tapped your screen, turn on your notification. If you think the chat room is fun, join the channel. Okay, join the channel. All right. Instead of looking for perfection, seek for consistency. Never give up on yourself. Never give up on your dreams. Never give up on yourself. Never give up on God. Okay? All right. It is your boy Genesis. God is the greatest. Thank you to the military personnel. Thank you to the Army. Thank you to the Navy. Thank you to the Navy SEALs. God bless y'all. Air Force. God bless y'all. Thank you to the veterans. You guys protect the homeland. Shout out to the Marines as well. God bless y'all. Thank you, 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 thank you. And shout out to the ICE, baby. And shout out to the 45th, now the 47th President of the United States. Shout out to our esteemed members, the GOAT, Luke. God bless you. God bless you. Yeah. God bless you. Shout out to Ellie. Shout out to Ringmasters. God bless you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And of course, I gotta say, it's a hard work to be a moderator, especially on a channel like this. God bless you, C. Shelley. Mr. Busky, God bless you. Thank you, the Bucket Master. God bless you. I see we're not giving so many buckets these days. I guess the tears is going down. Anyway, God bless y'all. Thank you. It's been a long stream. We've been streaming for about 4 hours now. Your boy Genesis got to go. Shout out to Jet as well. Jet says, lol, messed up the outro. Yes. Yes. Sometimes you mess up the outro. But who cares? Okay. Who cares? All right. And I just want to say something, yo. Shout out to the fathers. We just celebrated Father's Day. God bless you, fathers. Life is hard. You got to work hard. You got to pay the bills. You got to spend time with your kids. You got to sacrifice your time, your energy, your strength for your family and for your craft and the things that you believe in. But keep going. Keep fighting for your dreams. And keep loving on your family, because fathers are important in the household. I'll say that one more time. Fathers are important in the household. So fathers, God bless y'all. And shout out to the mothers as well. Mothers has been holding it down. They've been holding it down for generations, yo. So I got to say shout out to the mothers as well. And what else? I really believe that peace is achievable. It is just very, very hard to get there. It's very expensive. Yeah, hopefully God intervenes and makes sure all of this doesn't escalate into something that nobody can handle. But yeah. God bless you guys. Have a wonderful day. It is your boy Genesis. God is the greatest. I believe the United States is the greatest country in the world, the greatest country on the face of the earth. I love the United States. I'm grateful to the United States. And thank you guys for being here, man. All right. Your boy Genesis got to go. Don't forget to double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel, and show some love to your friends and family. You never know what people are going through. Life is not just about politics, okay? Don't just sit down watching MSNBC, CNN, Fox all day, okay? When I'm streaming, that's when I'm watching this. If I'm not streaming, I'm having a good time with my 5-year-old daughter or watching a movie or working, okay? So don't just sit in front of the TV 24/7 watching MSN, DNC, or CNN or Fox or whatever you watch. It's not, that's not healthy, okay? And clear your mind. Drink some water, eat some fruits, okay? Drink some water, eat some fruits, get some rest. It's important. America needs healthy individuals, all right? With that being said, it is your boy Genesis. God bless y'all. Love y'all.